Thank you very much. Good afternoon once again. And what a pleasure to have you all here today in a full house. Today is a very special day. We have extended our invitation to you guys, the Filmmakers Association members, so you can get together and discuss things that matters. Before we go too deep into the things that matters, first of all, let me just quickly introduce myself and the rest of the beautiful people that are sitting with me here. And somebody doesn't want to be beautiful, that's why he went to sit on the other side. But those people are also beautiful. My name is Armas, Shivote Armas. If you leave one of the Armases out, then you're speaking of a different Armas Shivote. Tim knows that very well. I'm the secretary of the Filmmakers Association of Namibia. And I'll start on the floor, Mr. Baron Joseph, chairman of FEN. And on my right, Ms. Shuna Darigo, the vice chairperson of FEN. And on my left, we have Angelo Viringa, who is can somebody put a sellotape on this guy's mouth? Who is responsible for membership drive, an initiative within FEN. Right. We also have Mr. Vixen Angola in absentia, but I think he will be joining us online. And Ms. Esther Biekas, she's not here, she's attending to equally important aspects of this beautiful industry. And Joseph. And second on the agenda, we want to discuss the developments of the position paper, as the vice chair alluded to. And Mr. Darigo is going to take us through that. And third point on the agenda, we are going to discuss, once again, as the vice chairperson has suggested, we are going to discuss the amendment of the FEN Constitution. And then we have point number 4, the way forward. The way forward will be a brief summary also by the chairperson, just to sort of like really round off everything. And we'll also give the floor an opportunity to suggest anything under that same point. And then we have got any other business. Again, the floor under point number 5 will have an opportunity to contribute to this agenda if there is any other important aspect that we have left out and needed to be addressed. Having said so, I would like to hand over to the chairman of the FEN board to share with us and everybody else. If there's anyone online that is joining us online, welcome. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Okay, howdy folks, once again. I'm totally stoked for all of us to get together and be here and talk about this industry that we're so passionate about. So awesomeness. Also, thanks a lot to Comrade Secretary Armas, Shuvute Armas, for helping us chair this meeting today. So don't worry guys, there's no beef here. Yeah, there's no problem. The reason why I was sitting in the crowd is because I've got a few things to talk on tonight. So I didn't want to start off talking, continue talking, and end talking the evening. So we kind of split the responsibilities nicely amongst ourselves. So in terms of my thing, I just want to run through Essentially what is a midterm review or report in terms of what we have done. I just want to put it up on the screen there, so just give me a moment. Just to give you an update of our midterm review 24-25. So I literally compiled this report like almost at the beginning of the year, just after the Swakopmund retreat. And things have been happening so fast after that, I actually have a need to update it again, like 3 weeks later. But a lot of those updates you will get in what Masa Daringo will be saying after this, especially in terms of the project paper and the development of the project paper. We will share this online with the members, so you'll have time to go through it. But essentially, following its revival in May 2024, the Filmmakers Association of Namibia has achieved significant milestones in its mission to strengthen and promote the Namibian film industry. Membership has substantially increased, growing from about 25 members at the inception to about 75 members by the end of 2024. Our target is to reach at least 150 members by the end of our tenure. I have to already say from the cuff, it's been plateauing a bit, but we're looking at ways to boost up those member numbers again. I think Mr. Angelo will have some nice ideas on that, but we can grind them at the end of this. Notable achievements. So the first thing that we all have to agree, the last time that we were here was to discuss the NFC situation and the representation. The fact that that situation was resolved and we have now moved on to the point where we have NFC representation, Mr. Ronald James sitting there being our commissioner. And you can ask him, it's been a long year for him. These last 2 months have been busy, and I can believe it for them, even just as busy, especially on the NFC side. So we're very stoked about it. We're also very stoked with the amount of trust that was handed over to the industry, if you think about them actually chairing the NFC board rather than any of the other members that could have chaired it. So we're in pole position there, which is a very, I think for me, that's a plus, it's a good achievement. Obviously, last year, we did the fan film breakfast event as well as the film week in collaboration with the NFC, which was a good one. At that event, we did launch our website. We also had members who attended the Kino Ochiwarongo event, which is geared towards training emerging filmmakers. And the Honorable Secretary Armas Shuvute Armas and our very own Swara, Angelo Varinga was there, teaching the people acting and lighting. So there was a few graduates in that regard. We definitely look to continue this interaction with the NFC, especially in terms of Kino and being involved in that. Film week coming up this year again, we'll definitely be very involved in that, or the new board, or the continuation of this board. So here's the big one, the position paper development, data collection and analysis. FAN initiated this particular process to come up with a comprehensive position paper to inform policy and strategic objectives for the film industry. The process has been ongoing, it's very extensive. I think even last night we had a meeting around the project paper last night again, and I think the general consensus was that we're basically on the line now of getting this thing done. You know, it's just a push a bit more. Part of getting it done is also this presentation that we're doing here tonight. To tell you guys what we are doing, what we found out, and how we see us coming up with solutions for the industry in terms of that. So that'll be key for us, getting it over the line. After this process, it's going to be a lot of lobbying. As everybody is aware, there's a lot of, how can we put it? There's a lot of shifts or paradigm shifts happening on top of each other in terms of that. The nice thing is the outlook for the industry is very positive. It's very good for the next regime, for the next government, for the next few years. But it's up to us to make use of those opportunities, to harness those opportunities and to capitalize on them. I just have to reiterate at this point what the Vice Chairperson raised already. We set up a meeting. We had 30, almost 40 people that RSVP'd that they would be here. And as you can see, the results are totally different. But this is just for cookies and tea now, guys. But when it comes to, for instance, implementing a law or lobbying for a law to be changed or getting incentives going, then this type of participation would be, it's not what we want. We can't do it that way. So I strongly encourage all members to participate as best they can. Even online, the group is there. You can still participate now. You can still talk. You can still mention. You can still log in and view. There's nothing that excludes you in the age of technology. So, as we said, you're going to get a full analysis of this one. This is where a lot of the work for about the last 6 months, or almost 8 months has gone for the board and different individuals within the filmmakers community. What also happened as part of this, so towards the end of last year, there was a retreat in Ochirongo, for which we got invited as well as the Filmmakers Association, or as the industry, where they started to discuss the NDP 6 and where we would fit in there. There we collaborated with the Ministry of Arts and Culture, the Directorates of Arts, specifically Unkariku, who is heading the director there. So we were really involved with it in terms of what they are proposing for NDP 6. So if you would understand the structure of NDP 6, is there are pillars. Those pillars have subsections, or I don't know, the smarter people will understand it better. But our vote essentially falls under the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, because we an art or culture industry. That's where if we're going to get development money, that's probably where it would come from. Yeah, in terms of the national budget, where will be allocated. So we've already started that collaboration and talking to them. So what's nice in terms of what they propose for NDP 6, there's 2 things that already came out somewhere. So one of their flagship programs would be creating cultural hubs around the country. Not specifically film hubs, but we've suggested that one of these hubs maybe in the country could, for instance, be a film hub. But other hubs could, for instance, be in different areas. They could be looking at other art forms, like it could be woodcraft in the north somewhere, or it could be a different music in another area. So we already included in that particular conversation. Another part of the position paper in terms of the programs that we're coming up with is getting funding into the industry and getting some sort of money for us to do programs or to do productions. So the programs that we have suggested here really tries to address those key issues in terms of that. If I can just summarize it in terms of that. But for NDP 6 and being part of that focal group, as I said, these discussions are high level. So the details of your plan and those things are not relevant at that particular stage anymore. As I found out to my ear, or what my irritation, those details are a bit more low level, probably at the stage where we are now. But in terms of the high level concepts, the high level vision for government, the arts, film industry, the arts and cultural industries are very important and very much central in that. So that's just in short what we have done up to now. As I said, since then we've really worked at concluding the position paper, if you please. I won't go through the rest of the report for the sake of time and not to bore you too much. But as you can see there, this is a nice one that I actually wanted to highlight for you. So we've started the process of regionalization, for instance. You'll see that in the report as well. So if you're looking at that particular area there, out of the, remember the 14th region being us, I think we're already well represented. We don't need a regional representative for, for commerce. But as you can see there, we have already contacted a few people, some of them very involved, very outspoken within the industry to represent some of the other places. Technically speaking, most of the areas are covered. The one that I have to work on is the south a bit more. Me and Andrew will get into that. We've got names and contacts. We just have to lock it down in terms of that. But as I've mentioned, the basic responsibilities of these representatives will be to be a conduit for the fan board, i.e. get information to the regions and get information and inputs from the region. As simple as that. And from that, just to make sure that those people are, or everybody is included in the national film conversation. I think that's a nice one for me that I wanted to look at. Also something that won't be included in the report directly, but we will also share that, is we're also starting to look at standardized rates within the industry. standardization. Commissioner James is very involved in that process as well as other board members, as well as industry members. I did share the link for that group, that task force group, the working group. I did share it on the group, the members group. So you are welcome to join because we need all inputs in terms of that. Just coming up with a basic baseline standard for the industry in terms of funding. But for a lot of the positions like your producer or your DOP, these people can then obviously negotiate their true rates. They can negotiate upwards. But we at least want to set a floor, a bottom, a bottom for everybody. So we don't keep on falling through the cracks as we've been doing all these years. Or what do you say, Robert? Absolutely. So yeah, that's, I think in short, that's basically my story. As I said, there's still a lot more in this report. As you can see, there's a few other things being mentioned here. The guild formation, I think that's something that'll pop up on the agenda a bit later on. But as part of that process is the standardization. We need to have a rate card system. But expect to see more in terms of that. Generally speaking, this is also something worth mentioning that the chairperson of the NFC has been doing the Meet the Gatekeepers engagements for us. And she's done a few nice ones, and we hope to have a few more before the end of our tenure. I believe one of the next ones coming up will be on AI in our industry. So yes, this is literally where we are in terms of the next steps. Finalize the industry position paper. We're very close to that. We want to get increased visibility. As I mentioned now, what we're moving into now is basically lobbying. We need to make sure that the people know about us and they know what our needs are. This is the time to talk. If ever you're going to talk, now is the time to talk for the industry, obviously for yourself in that industry as well. Completing the standardized rate card, strengthening regional representation, implementation of a regulatory and legal framework. So also in terms of that, there's a lot of conversations going on around incentives. There's a few working groups with regard to that. The key leader in that area is the NIPDB, the Namibian investment body, under the office of the president, I believe, no? Of the prime minister. No, we fall under MSAT, but where NIPD is, yeah. But they're leading that process, and what has happened? Yeah, but so what has happened recently is that they started cascading these task forces and breaking them down into smaller groups, focusing on different aspects within the industry. Like, for instance, the standardized rate card or standardizing the industry, getting an incentives policy going, a regime going for the film industry. And there's some very nice developments in terms of that. I think a lot of what's happening there, I'm not privy to say that as yet. Because a lot of it is still suggestion. We're going to have a meeting with the NIPDB tomorrow again, and I think a lot of those things will be solidified after that meeting or towards that meeting, and then I will be glad to share. You would recall on the members group, I did share the draft document, so you're not completely in the dark about that. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying I'm speaking under correction. Nothing there has been solidified or confirmed. But I mean, if you look at simple things like that, the possibility of being VAT exempted as a filmmaker for all those costs that go in there, that could be a huge difference for us. But once again, the key is our involvement. Yes, the policymakers want to help us, but if we're not knocking on the door every day, they might forget us because there's a lot of other people knocking on the door. So let's be cognizant of that and try and get it done in terms of that. Tonight we're doing the constitutional review. We're going to look at those areas. And then obviously, then we have to wrap it up in the next month or two, going into our annual general meeting, where, yeah, a new term begins. But for now, that's what I would have. If there's any other questions from the floor, I'd be glad to clarify or, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the beautiful review of our milestones. Perhaps we should not allow it to go too far. If there's anyone that have got a question or needs clarity, we are more than willing to offer the floor now. Oh, there's a mic there. Oh, sorry.
Is it on now? Good evening, everyone. Hello, Dayolo Lenga. Very simple question. Do we have a tentative date for the AGM?
No, actually not. We don't have a tentative date, but the set date for the last AGM was the 25th of May. The previous one, so that's exactly a year later. Yeah. Yes, we will share the presentation on the website and on the group. It will be uploaded this week.
Right? Anyone else? All right. In the absence of anything else, Cecil? Before you go, Cecil, those that are joining us online, if you have got a question, please just post it and then we will respond. Go ahead, Cecil.
Yeah, okay. I always start with and I need to get that stuff out of my system. You said on the members group you shared some kind of document. Can you just repeat that again? What was the document that you shared, or some draft or something? Did you not say that on the members group? Is it on the members group? Because is the members group the WhatsApp group? Is that what?
Sorry. The members WhatsApp group. Sorry, if I have to be.
I'm so sorry, but I was looking now, but I don't have that.
You don't have WhatsApp?
No, I have WhatsApp, but I don't have the members draft stuff. I don't have the draft stuff that you shared.
Okay, but I'll be glad to share it with you again. If that would help.
Yeah, I also saw that.
Sorry, I didn't get that, Cecil.
Sorry?
I didn't hear your last question.
I also saw in the quick run through of the thingies that, is it possible we can get it back on or something or not?
Oh, okay.
Is that a possibility, or are we going somewhere else? Oh, sorry, did you put away? No, there was some discussion paper with MAEC, Arts and Culture. I would like to, as a member, I'm a little bit in the dark kind of stuff. I would like to know what was discussed, what Fan proposed. I really would like to know that. I've been also part of NIPDP, the Harvard Lab thingy. And I also want to understand from a fan perspective, where's that thing now? Because it's been a long time that it's just discussions and talks and talks and talks. And there's been amazing ideas, but I don't know what happened to it. Like, for instance, one of the ideas that was there some time ago that I was attending was that the NIPDP, whatever, I'm sorry, apologies if I mispronounce what it is. But there was something that they talk about, that they went to some fund in Africa and had a conversation, and the fund was about financing movies in Namibia. And that fund said, no, we're not going to deal with independent producers. We're going to work through banks. And I thought like, oh, wow, finally, we are moving into the big leagues here. And that whole situation just, I don't know what happened to it, just died. They were going to talk, and it was basically that I can go to a bank and say, look, I need funding to make a production. And the banks would then say, here's some kind of funding with these kind of conditions and et cetera, et cetera. So that is sort of like, and I was very hopeful that that would unlock the industry, right, in a commercial way. But I don't know what happened to that. And even the last time I attended, there was no discussion of that. The last time I saw on NIPDP website, the paper that they presented started talking now about the creative industry. And I don't know what happened to the film industry, the concepts and ideas and stuff that we was discussing all this time. All of a sudden it became about the creative industry. So I'm just kind of like very wary about what's going on at the moment. At the moment, there's a lot of conversations going on with a lot of people, and everybody is important to have the conversations, but the conversations is happening in a lot of communities. And I don't understand what is really going on from a fan perspective. What are we talking about in the Namibian industry at this point in time? Who's talking to who? What are they talking about? How are my needs and stuff adhered to whatever's discussing about papers and stuff like that? So just in a generalities, I feel a little left out, not because I don't attend the meetings or sit in these conversations. It's just that there's a lot of conversations going on. There was a conversation with the Film Commission some time ago, a couple of months ago, right, from FAN and the Commission. I wanted to know what did FAN talk about to the Commission? What was decided? How did we think it and so on? Because, yeah, I feel a little lost. Thank you very much.
He just triggered my mind. There was a lot of surveys that we did last year towards the end. I just wanted to find out is a report ready? What was the outcome of those surveys and focus groups? Yeah, that was my question.
Okay, let me start with the last question first. Yes, the surveys, basically it's part of this project position paper that we're talking about. So it was key to informing us in terms of what we're going to do or come up with in terms of those strategies. So yes, it's ongoing. It's basically done now. We're waiting for the final draft of that report. So we're expecting it here by tomorrow or in this time. It's just details that we were looking for. Some of the critical things that we were looking at was we wanted to ask or answer specific questions as to the impact of the industry in certain areas, like for instance, job creation, economic impact, etc. So we were looking at that, and we hopefully have some sort of feedback. We should understand that to do a study like this one properly, you'll probably have to invest upwards of $1 million into it. We didn't have that money, so we used a colloquial way, if you please. So we got three, like a researcher, economist, a few people in that we could work with in terms of this. We also had Monjila Advisory, who's a project management company who actually deals with a lot of these things to help guide us through that process. So that process is being concluded now. We did it as cheap as possible, so don't expect $5 million results coming out of that. But I think it's already 2 steps in the right direction, because now somebody asked the questions, we've got a few answers on some of those questions. Coming to Mr. Moller's basic concern, but it's when I listen to your question, Cecil, it's very broad. It actually covers just about everything that we will be talking about tonight. But if I can just zoom in on a few specifics there, like for instance, talking to the NFC and how far is the conversations with the NFC? No, we didn't talk to the NFC a month ago. We probably spoke to the NFC yesterday or this morning, last week, 2 weeks before that. Ask Ronald, we've been talking and talking. To put it into context in terms of the Ministry of Arts and Culture, to put that into context. So if you're looking at the development plan and those conversations happening there was a real need for us to be included in that conversations, because that's where arts and culture is. And we are nowhere to be found in that conversation. So we made sure that we are involved in that conversation. What were we talking about? The same things that we are addressing to you guys now. It's also the same things that we are talking to the NIPDB about. So just to give you the high-level rundown of this, it's basically summed up in three, maybe 4 things. So the one thing is the project position paper. We want to get that out. The project position paper informs policy. Policy towards whether it's going to be incentives. What incentives will work for the industry, but what incentive work for what reason? That's the type of questions that we're trying to address there on the one level. It's a type of conversation we're also having with the NIPDB. Standardization of the industry, that's an ongoing conversation as well. Getting set rates, even amongst ourselves, we have to organize ourselves better in terms of that. Where do we stand and how do we want to fit into the bigger economic structure? So that's how we fit into the different conversations. And just to give you maybe some comfort, that as FAN, the reason why we're so aggressively positioning ourselves in these conversations is to make sure that we have one message going out to everybody, because these different entities have all got all these brilliant ideas for what they want to do for us without knowing what we actually truly need. And we are influencing that conversation. But it's simple. Our plans are simple. We want money for the industry. We want our products to get out there and to be, we want to make them number one, and we want them to get broadcast number two. But we also want to have that regulatory framework in which we can thrive. You know, like have some incentives to support us, tax rebates or whatever the thing is that can really help us to get this industry going. You will also see in the development of the paper, it's not simply about getting more money. Please give us more money, government. It's about creating a viable, sustainable industry. And I think that's maybe what we kind of got right now. So just hold, Mr. Moller, maybe some of your questions will get further elucidated as we go along. But definitely towards the end of maybe the second, third presentation, you are most welcome to ask again if we didn't clarify anything yet. But in short, we're trying to... dictate would be the wrong word, but we all script writers here. So we're trying to dictate the narrative in all these groups. Yeah, pun intended.
Yeah, so if I can just add on, maybe just in also just a bit of simpler terms, the objective of the position paper was basically to find out from the industry where we are. Where are we? What are our needs? So to develop a needs assessment, to develop a possible impact assessment as well, to say if you feed $1 million into the industry, what opportunities does that create for the filmmakers, but also how much employment does that create? So government wants to find out what are our needs, and also if they do give us the money, how does that speak to some of their concerns and their objectives? So that's why we wanted to create a document that feeds them information and that allows us to justify why we need X amount of money to be pumped into the industry, because that has to speak to employment, and that has to speak to economic development, right? But obviously we can't give that information without having input from the industry. So that's why we were doing all of these surveys and we were on your case about them, is because we have to back it up with something. So even if the researcher is compiling a certain document, that needs to be justified, or at least, you know, it has to be based on fact. So it can't just come from the board, right? So, and for those who are trying to figure out what is NDP, NDP is the National Development Plan. So every 5 years, or whenever a new government comes in, they have a plan where they decide how much is each and every industry getting. So if we're saying that we want to be included in NDP 6, which is the next term of the next government, so if the next government wants to feed money into the industry, we want to be there and say, listen, we've given you our needs assessment, we've given you our impact assessment as well, so this is the money that we're asking for, and this is why we're asking for that money. And this is how it contributes to economic development. So if you don't feed the government this information, they will just come up with any figure to say, okay, well, we don't really know what's going on in the film industry, so we're just going to give you guys 3 million. You know, last year we gave you 1 million, this year we'll probably give you like a 3 million. But that is not even 20% of what we need, right? So just for context.
If I could just add something to that. So maybe if we can just add small to what the Vice has already been saying. So the processes in terms of this, and I must admit to you guys, I'm pretty new to the political spheres and stuff like that, yeah? But the first thing that I realized as a creative is, yes, I've got great ideas, and I know how we can fix this thing, and I even wrote like pages and pages of proposals, and it's like, nah, where's your fact? There's too much risk on risk here, what's your analysis of that? And it's like, oh, okay. And then I realized there's a process that you follow with these guys. And it's really about ticking boxes as you're going along. And as I'm saying, we've been helped a lot in going through those little check boxes. Yeah, and we've ticked most of them. We've done pretty well. Up to the point that I'm confident as an industry that we are in pole position. We're definitely the front runner amongst all the other art sectors here. And I think under MEAC, there's something like we're part of 29 different sectors. So imagine that. There's still stuff like, for instance, okay, I won't even go into that. So we're competing with those people for the same cake, for a slice of the same cake. The reality is, I don't know of any other industry that's done a needs assessment that has come up with consultative programs as we've done. So that's why I'm saying we're in pole position. But you would realize, if you understand the current political paradigm, for you to be part of the next budget or the next development plan, you should have been in it by now. You can still make your plans and come show up next year. So that's the basic thing. That I think we're in pole position. We just have to capitalize on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecil, for that question. And I can see it's drawing quite interesting conversations. And these are the type of conversations that will not finish in one engagement, for example. Before we move on, Joel, welcome. Is there any other question?
Just maybe tell him that we went through we gave our report. Maybe just tell him what we missed.
Okay, yeah, just go ahead.
Okay, so before your question, I think you missed the report as to sort of like what we were busy with. We did a presentation, and we'll share that presentation on the various platforms as well. But please go ahead with your question. If somebody can please assist him with a mic.
Thank you very much. I just want to apologize for coming late. I'm actually coming, I was filming. We literally just wrapped and immediately I came directly here, so apology for that. Just a quick question. Is possible, maybe it was already addressed I might have missed it, but the Namibia Film Commission have done sort of a study some years back. I'm trying to remember now. I'm tempted to think 5 years ago, but maybe longer. I was just wondering if you were able to sort of continue where they ended, or maybe even addressing some of the stuff that they were not able to address in terms of what they were trying to inquire. Because I do remember some of the initial goal was also to determine and understanding the economic values, maybe a little bit more information, the key players and some of the incentives and so on. So, yeah.
We did. That was actually sort of like where we started with the team that we appointed. So we gave them, we did some digging, and then that's the document that we shared with them to say that we want to have something that's potentially similar to this, but obviously more relevant, because I believe that report was 2018 to 2020.
Correct.
And so obviously COVID happened and a lot of things changed, but we did use that as a baseline and as a guiding point to come up with what we have now. But Mr. Byron did say earlier on that it's still work in progress, and we didn't have the budget to do a full report and a full research, because those quotations that we got are $1 million up to do a thorough industry position paper. So this is sort of like just a small little document, but we do want to continue with the data collection. And we do want to also ask the members to also share reports. I think this is a conversation also that we're having with NFC as to how do we create better processes that allow us to collect information or data from productions and from producers, because that is information that we need to keep on feeding the government and to keep on justifying our budget requirements. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Like I said, this conversation will go on and on. Let's go back to the agenda, and so we still leave us space and time to have more engagement after the official agenda. The position paper has been mentioned in numerous occasions during the presentation of the chairman. And I just thought this chairman might even present the position paper without us getting to the actual point of discussion, right? Let us now allow Mr. Panashe Daringo this opportunity to to present to us the findings and what we have so far as part of this so much anticipated position paper. Mr. Darigo?
All right. So good evening again, everyone. My name is Panache Daringo, and I'm honored to be able to present the findings from this paper. And I'll give a little bit of context, maybe just to help at least set the tone. So professionally, when I'm not a producer on a film set, I'm a project manager by profession, and I'm a PPP expert or professional. So we do a lot of this for government currently already. We structure a lot of programs for government. We've currently, for the last 4 years, been managing the Harambee Prosperity Plan for the government. And we are actually working with the National Planning Commission to develop the 6th National Development Plan. So we've got a good understanding on how government works and how it operates. I think maybe also just key to clarify is that the position paper on one end tries to do two things. It tries to understand what is the landscape of the industry, so what are those issues that exist, and it tried to do that by obviously getting data from the ground up. And then secondly, it tried to come up with solutions to those issues. I think a lot of the papers and a lot of the research that's been done highlights solutions that are in silos and in isolation. And I think the idea for this program, or this at least paper, was to try and figure out what does a holistic solution look like at a time when the world is changing, right? And I think a lot of you guys have already noticed the changes that are coming. You know, film was a part of a bigger creative industry. I think in the next few weeks, you'll notice that there's some changes that will come. Film is now falling under a bigger, broader creative sector. So you're in the same group as sort of video gamers, as cultural dancers, as musicians. It's a bigger creatives group. So you'll see there's a bigger shift towards creatives, and you'll see it as it unfolds. I think some of the stuff I can't divulge currently. But over time, you will need to compete for a piece of the cake, right? The key things that also went into the paper, which are worth highlighting ahead of time, is that we understand that government is a big player in the industry. Player in the sense that the bulk of the funding that actually exists in the industry will probably come from government one way or the other, whether it's through NFC, whether it's through central government, whether it's through NBC, whatever it is, it's a government-driven program, right? So it's important to play to government's rules. And government has got a way with which it runs. So making sure that you're within a national development plan is a big part. As of now, currently the film industry is cited within one of the focal areas. So the way NDP 6 is being set up, you have this bigger program, you have these goals under it, and under the goals you have about 50 different focus areas where film, for the first time, has actually been cited as a key priority. That's a big milestone, because what it means is that government can't fund something that's not in a plan. All right. So if you're not in the NDP, you can't get money from a ministry, large money now, because it doesn't come into the annual plans, it doesn't come into the strategic plan of the ministry, so it falls flat. So the first thing you want to do is to make sure you are in those big plans. So getting into NDP 6 is super important. I think the board has done well to lobby with the politicians as well, and you'll see that the industry is also cited in the manifesto from a political party, which are two big major milestones, because then within the ruling party, you're cited as a priority, but you're also cited as a priority within government itself. So suddenly now money can flow. Why? Because then you have a program, and programs are what get funded. It's an 85 billion plus program, and it starts there, right? So a lot of the work is probably behind scenes because you don't see it happen, but there's countless of meetings that have happened to engage government to make sure that that happens. Okay, so what should the position paper do? The position paper is supposed to then inform politicians, government, on what the needs are from the industry. So all those surveys that we talked about is trying to collect the needs, understand what those are, and communicate them as one voice to say, we've done these surveys, we've collected this data, we've analyzed different markets, and we see these being the challenges and the issues. And once those issues have been identified, then going one step further to saying, here are some solutions, government, that you can consider that can address and alleviate these challenges. That's really at the core of it. Okay. So the paper itself, so there's a brief agenda. We'll cover quickly the overview, the purpose. I think we've touched on it. We'll touch on some of the challenges. We'll touch on the recommendations. And the bullet 1 to 3 is really the first part of the paper, understanding the landscape and the needs. Bullet 4 and 5 are 2 programs that have been identified as potential solutions to some of these challenges. I think the colleagues have earlier alluded to the fact that the paper is not closed and there's room to add more programs, right? So if there's 1 or 2 programs that is viewed as a potential catalytic program that addresses the issues, there's an opportunity to still incorporate it. And then just run through some of the overall big benefits and numbers that come with the papers. Right, so the paper was obviously commissioned by FAN, and NFC has given a lot of input, and that's important because you want the paper not to just be an industry paper, you want government to be part of it as well. So you want government to acknowledge and almost own the paper, saying that it's a joint developed paper, right? So having NFC there is key. And like I said earlier, the focus is to understand the needs of the industry and evaluate the impact that various policies have. This is important because film, like I said earlier, if you look at just the NDP aspect, there's 50 focus areas. Education is a focus area. Agriculture is a focus area. Power is a focus area. Water is a focus area. Hydrogen is a focus area. Mining is a focus area. And all these people are looking for money from one place. That's government. Government has only got so much money. So you're competing to shoot films against people that are trying to get money for classrooms and water in their communities where they're dying. So your story and your argument has to be compelling. Minister of Finance has to sit down and say, I've only got 80 billion Namibian dollars. How do I distribute it? Do I go and drill a borehole for communities that are dying and that have, diseases like bilharzia, et cetera, or do I give you 6 million to go shoot a film that we don't know what's going to happen to? You know what I mean? And those are the decisions that a Minister of Finance who has no idea what the benefits of a film industry are. When the position paper started, we talked to a lot of people to say, what are the multiply effects that come with the industry? That data is not available. Nobody can tell us today that if you put $1 in the film industry, these are the multiply effects, these are the number of jobs that it can create. That data is not there. But the schools have that data. The schools have got that data to the T because they've done the economic assessment, and they can tell you that $1 in school today has got these multiply effects over the next 10 years. It reduces crime, it does all these things, and it's quantified. We don't have that data as an industry. We don't even have data about the films that we're shooting. How would we have this data? So a big part of this was to try and understand at a very high level what are those impacts, because if you can articulate those impacts, you have a better chance getting money because you're competing against people that are very eloquent in explaining the value that comes with giving money to them. Okay. And then the goal is obviously to identify challenges. The paper didn't spend too much time on this because a lot of us know what the challenges are. The challenges have been repeated. A lot of them are the same challenges that were in the previous paper, that were there in 2010, and they keep exacerbating, right? So the challenges was not a big focus on this, but it was to identify some of them, but more importantly, to identify solutions and realistic solutions, right? A solution can't be, we need more money. I mean, that's what we've been saying for the last 15 years and nothing's changed. So solutions have to be a lot more structured in their approach and understand the landscape of the world. Okay. And obviously foster competitive and film industry that promotes local culture and contributes to the economy. So that's important, right? Government is not in the business of making profit, but government wants to build an overall economy. So we need to drive those economic benefits. So a lot of the key findings, so this, what's presented now, is a really summarized version. The paper is obviously a much bigger paper. So we'll just highlight some of the key findings. So the surveys were carried out in November to try and understand various information. 44 participants sort of participated in the survey. So various producers, various sort of post-production members, writers, across the whole value chain, participated in the survey across both feature films and documentaries. So already that's where your first bit of information or your first gaps lie, right? You can't tell me an industry has got 44 people, right? I mean, it begs the strengths of the industry. So I'll just reiterate what the colleagues earlier said. If there's a survey to say, guys, let's collect some data, we have to participate in those, because if we don't, we're actually contributing to our current demise. If that data is not there, it's not there. And if it's not there, unfortunately, nobody will listen to you. So you need the data to inform the policymaker. If I go to the Minister of Finance and I say, we did an industry position paper and we had 44 respondents, I'm like, okay, is that the industry? It's 44 people? So I can't stress it anymore. The biggest flop, if there is, of any survey is data. The previous report, the previous position paper lacked data, and that's why it was not as strong. The current position paper, the biggest weakness it has today, I can be honest with you guys, is the data, right? Because there's only 44 people that have participated. I think in the one group there's 300 people, right? So you've got 15% of people that have participated in there. It's not representative of the industry. And all we can urge is to say, let's get more participation in surveys, in events. Otherwise, we never really build an industry. Be that as it may, from the 44 participants, the sizable chunk of them were in Commerce region, which obviously also creates challenges as well, because in an ideal world, you really want all 14 regions really well represented, right? There could be multiple issues that contribute to that, and I think the colleagues touched on it earlier. The report was done on a shoestring budget. In an ideal world with bigger budgets, you actually drive down to different regions, you host sessions like these, you advertise it on the radio, but you can see the numbers running, right? So obviously the representation across the different regions was not the strongest. But some of the findings, a majority of the respondents, 40%, have been in the industry for more than 15 years, which is good because it tells you that the data is fairly rich. Majority of the respondents indicated that they are permanently employed within the industry, so about 65%, which is also very good. So it's not people that are giving you data for the first time. So you've got people that are veterans, that are in the industry, they see it on a daily basis, which strengthens the quality of the report. And the findings show that all the respondents were educated with at least 80%, almost 80% having tertiary education. So it's people that know what they are answering, right? So that's important to understand the response, who's responding to your surveys. Then we asked respondents about the challenges they face due to the current policies. Limited access to development funding was the most commonly reported challenge. So about 75% of the respondents followed up saying that this is a real challenge. So I mean, it's not a new thing. We know that funding has always been a big issue in film. Majority, 70%, either disagree or strongly disagree that the current policies support local content. So the view is that whatever legislation is in place right now doesn't 100% support the current industry, right? 68% either disagree or strongly disagree that the current policies sufficiently promote innovation and creativity in the film industry. A significant portion, 61%, disagree or strongly disagree that the current policies are effectively enhancing the visibility of the Namibian films. And about 65% disagree or strongly disagree that government policies are effective in fostering revenue growth in the film. So, I mean, what it tells you is that the policies that are in place are not growing the industry. That's really how to sum it up. And there's a bunch of policies, right? There's a bunch of government institutions, instruments, policies, legislation that speaks to a lot of this. In an ideal world, if you do decide I want to start changing some of that policy, I don't know how many of you know how difficult it is to change legislation in this country. It takes you anything between 3 years, it can go up to 5 years, it can even go longer if you want to change policy. So saying let's change the Film Act or let's change this policy is not a 5-minute thing, right? It goes through Parliament, there's a separation of power. It's a process, right? And we're not driving it, it's driven by government, people that don't shoot films, people that don't understand the industry. So it's important to know that some of the solutions can't be go and change the act, go and change the policies, because that's going to take 5 years. We'll talk again in 2030 and we're in the same boat. Some more challenges. 68.2% of the respondents find funding not accessible. So funding is a big problem. A clear majority, 65%, find policies as not effective in attracting investors or co-producers. So because of our landscape, we're not getting the co-productions that we need to grow the industry. And it makes sense, right? You look at South Africa, you get 30, 40% back, of whatever you put in. Here, what you get today, nothing, right? Why would anyone come and film here? A majority, 68% of the respondents believe that government interventions have not significantly increased job opportunities in the film industry. And in summary, the respondents believe that complex or restrictive regulations, lack of incentives for local and international collaboration, inconsistency or limited funding support, limited access to government providing infrastructure, lack of coordination with government entities, such as drone regulations, filming permits, and preference for foreign film crews over local film crews are the... So you're hearing government, right? Why? Because we're so dependent on government, on policy, on funding, on markets, on everything. So how sustainable is our industry, right? If we're going to keep asking government for money, if we're going to keep waiting for government to change the policy, then we don't have much to work with, right? So that's what a lot of the study looked at. Obviously, the main study, the full study, looks at each of the individual questions and how they were responded to. But these are just summaries of some of the main outcomes. The overall outcome, if one was to summarize it, Namibia's film industry has a lot of potential, but faces obstacles that hinder the growth. So the potential is there. We know you can shoot the Mad Maxes of the world, but you need to unlock a couple of things, right? The current policies are not effective in supporting the industry, and there's need to improve funding, infrastructure, training, and policy frameworks. International recognition of Namibian film crew is growing, showcasing the industry's potential. So we know that we're onto something, but there's a lot of work that actually needs to be done to get it going. A summary of the challenges. So if you were to summarize the main challenges, they come up to this. At the top of the pile, funding, limited financial access and incentives. The second one is infrastructure, so shortage of specialized facilities and outdated equipment. Policy, restrictive regulations for drones and filming permits that discourage filmmakers. It's also very expensive. Skills, we know that there is limited skills, and so there's need for training, mentorship, capacity building, access to market. I think half of us have got films that we're done that are sitting on a hard drive at home, right? You want to get the film out there, you want to sell it. So market access is a big thing. So there's limited platform that actually showcase Namibian film, both locally but also internationally. Data, I mean, we've touched on data, insufficient data to track the real economic contributors. Currently, when filmmakers finish shooting, we don't spend the time to give that data, whether it's to NFC or to FAN, to say, look, these are the numbers of people that were employed. This was that data, right, feeds somewhere, right? If you didn't submit it, the next guy didn't, and we sit with the vacuum. When we're asked, what is the multiply effect, we can't answer. So data is a big issue. Even with NFC, data is a big issue, right? Collaboration, limited engagement between the industry and the film sector, and the cultural preservation part. So there's not a lot of representation across the different sort of groups that we have. All right, so what are the recommendations that were identified? So some of them was to establish a production incentive program, some tax rebates, co-productions, et cetera, and you can see already how long that would take, right? I mean, it's policy, incentives, it's passing laws, so it's a good recommendation, but it's not going to change the issues today. Implementing a film-friendly policy framework. I mean, I can write a book about that, right? Increase government funding. I mean, good luck trying to get more money for shooting a film over those social needs, right? Not without the data. Promoted private-public partnership, so getting new money in through the private sector, and which is something that we'll touch on shortly. Improving data collection, support cultural films, so increase funding for films that really showcase our history and our culture. Expand training initiatives, more workshops, skills, scholarships, mentorships, and publishing statistics so that people actually know what the industry looks like. Okay. So that's the first half of the paper, right? It's telling us what does the land look like, what are the big recommendations, and how do we move forward. And I think that's where the board was very clear to say, look, some of these solutions are not 100% practical, and we're almost spectators in the process. And there is need to be a little bit more proactive and find ways to dovetail some of these recommendations into solutions for some of the challenges that we see. So there's two programs that were then sort of identified to maybe address some of these challenges. So the slide that you have in front of you is a slide of two programs, Program 1 and Program 2. The one program is a top-down program, so you'll see there's an arrow coming from the top coming down, and the second one is a bottom-up program, right? So the one at the top tries to cover the big elements, the funding issues, the capacity issues, the market issues, the equipment issues. And the program at the bottom tries to tackle grassroots capacity in an inclusive manner with very broad representation, tying into the regional impact that we know government loves, that we know is also very important, right? So the idea is to say, you can't do it from one side, you need to come from the top and you need to come from the bottom up. And in the one program, it's a mechanism to develop a larger film program that addresses a lot of the challenges that were identified. And the second one tries to address the gaps in the balance. Okay. Are we together still, just to make sure? Yeah? I haven't lost anyone yet. Okay. So we're going to now deep dive into the two programs to try and explain how those programs work and how we believe those programs could address a lot of those challenges that have been identified. So on one end, raise the proposed recommendations, give them to government, still lobby to say, let's change the policies, let's address this, let's get the incentives. So that work carries on. But at the same time, figure out how to get these programs up and running. Okay. So at a high level, these are some of the preliminary data that's come out of the programs. So the idea was to say, and I think when the study started at the very beginning, the comment was, how do we get government? How do we create a 200 million Namibian dollar program? Something that creates work for everybody, employs a lot of people, addresses all these issues, but does it in a sustainable manner. So ideally, these two programs have the potential to create a large amount of content. I think the initial estimates are looking at about more than 50,000 minutes of content. There is a local quota that somebody like NBC, for instance, have, which is almost like 400,000 minutes, right? So even with a massive program like this, you still don't meet that quota, but you're a step closer. Today, you go to NBC, they tell you we don't have the content, so we can't enforce it, right? But that local content quota says that you should have a certain amount of money, a certain amount of content, a certain amount of minutes reserved for local homegrown content. The bulk of it is news, political affairs, current affairs, very, very, very light stuff, not film, not TV, no documentary. So the idea is that possibly through these programs, you can create a lot of minutes. You can create up to 2,000 direct jobs. So a job definition being employment for at least 6 months over the program, right? So you get continuous revenue for at least 6 months. Some cases it could even be more, with at least 20,000 unique jobs. So 20,000 different people that actually get access to these opportunities. And to do that, you essentially try and build a lot of content. Where does a lot of content come from? From soapies. So you possibly then commission 4 fully fledged soapies, right? Something that's got 230 to 220 episodes that runs for a period of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years. And that just continuously employs writers, continuously employs cameramen, the works, right? Possibly then producing about 54 grassroots films every year. So every year you produce a grassroots film coming from the region, from all 14 regions, making sure that you're intentional to get at least 4 films coming from every part of the country. 6 feature films every year. And if you sort of quantify the total monetary value of the program, estimates is that it could be about 500 million, right? So it's a lot of money, and it's a type of program that will keep everybody busy, right? There's almost too much work for us. What type of support would you require from government? The preliminary numbers are showing about 10%. So essentially going to government and saying, government, we've got a 500 million Namibian dollar program. We only need 10% from you. But if you give us this 10% over 6 years, we can create 2,000 direct jobs and we can keep the industry busy. You don't have to hear from us for a very long time. And that's really at the core of it. And then it opens up then elements such as your access to funding, your equipment, your markets, and everything else. And then obviously then the training. I think the training has come out very strongly. Built in within the programs is then training for up to 3,000 people continuously, right? So then you make sure that you're continuously skilling people. So those are the big stats and the big data that these programs potentially have. And then we'll just deep dive into each of the programs quickly. Any questions here so long? I know time is maybe not on our side, so I'll move quickly into each of the programs. I'll cover the one. I'll let Mr. Byron cover the second one, so that you don't hear my voice for too long. All right, so program 1 is a national film program. So this program is a little bit of a complicated one to explain, but it works, right? We currently have all the laws in place to do something like this as a country. As a matter of fact, government is calling and begging industries across the whole board to come up with innovative mechanisms to leverage off private sector money, right? So government will never give you 500 million just like that, right? They'll always say, what can we get from private sector to blend? So how do we transfer some risk to private sector? How do we leverage the expertise from private sector? And how do we create something that's sustainable? Sustainability is a big, big word. So in this model, and I believe we will share this as well, and it's in the paper as well, so you'll have access to it. But basically, at the top you have government, and government gets into a public-private partnership agreement with an operator. We call him a concessionaire, as you know, in the industry. So you get a concessionaire, and that could be a cocktail of organizations, right? It could be somebody super experienced, somebody like a Ferguson Films, somebody who's done lots of productions, who understands industry, who's got a lot of skills, who's got access to capital. It could be somebody like even a Showmax. It could be somebody like a MultiChoice even, right? So you get a big operator that comes on board, and then government gets into an agreement with them. You set up various KPIs to say, this is what we require as government, and Mr. Private Operator, that's what you're required to deliver. The appointment of that person is done through an open bidding process, so it's not handpicked or anything like that. You run a tender. It's a public tender. It's a very transparent process. So this is globally done as well, right? This is not just unique to Namibia. It's a global best practice. It's actually pulling from the World Bank's guidance. Okay, so you advertise this thing, you get this guy on board. So let's use MultiChoice for the lack of a better word, right? So MultiChoice is then your concessionaire. So MultiChoice gets into an agreement with the Namibian government for a 6-year contract, right? Or 10-year contract, depending on whatever that period is. The agreement will then say, MultiChoice, we require you to produce content. We want those 4 TV series, we want of 230 episodes, we want 6 feature films, we want that whole squeal. But we want you to appoint Namibians to produce that content. Because we're giving you the contract, we require you to give to those filmmakers some form of a pre-sale agreement. So here you'll see this thing here called pre-sale. If you want to get funding, I think there was a question earlier around funding with the banks and whatnot. We do a lot of consulting work for the banks. We've actually secured almost 3 billion sort of worth of funding for different clients with the banks. But what the banks always want to know is, who's your offtake, right? If you've got a film and you've got a project, who's going to buy it and what are they buying it for? Currently, you can't get that. Nobody's willing to give pre-sale agreements. So in a scenario like this, we force this operator for getting the contract to issue pre-sale agreements. What that pre-sale agreement is, it's your offtake, it's your access to market. It's a piece of paper that says that this content, if it's produced within these quality standards, we'll pay you $2 million for it. With that, you can have a very different conversation with the bank. Why? Because till now, you're just saying, I want to shoot a film. The first question they'll ask is, who's gonna buy your film? If you don't have an answer, they'll ask you to leave, right? So suddenly now you have potential access to a market through this guy here who's giving you a pre-sale, right? With that pre-sale, you can now go to a lender, and various lenders then become an option here, from your developmental lenders all the way to even your commercial lenders. And even somebody like an NFC becomes then a potential lender in that scenario. Why? Because they know that this production is going to be bought, right? And they know that this concessionaire here, let's say MultiChoice, has looked at the script, they've looked at the story, they've helped redefine and shape the story such that it works. Similar to what MultiChoice have done with the Mukuru project and all these things, they then take the responsibility to work and panel beat the content. Why? Because they have to sell the content. That content has to be marketable such that they get a return, right? Is that clear? Are we still together? Okay. So then essentially, what are we addressing? We're addressing one big challenge, which is one, access to market. The second one is we're addressing an issue of access to finance, because we're empowering the filmmaker to have something to actually be able to say, here's something that will be bought. Okay. Obviously, the concessionaire will work very closely with you. If it's your first film, they'll almost hold your hand to make sure you get it done. Why? Because if you mess it up, they can't sell it, and their pre-sale agreement becomes an issue for them. So they'll do everything in their power to hold your hand, but which is what we actually want. Why? Because we want the skills to be transferred to the guys at the bottom. As you grow and as you mature as a filmmaker, you'll have more reign. Netflix, all these guys, they've got a similar model, right? Okay, So suddenly, all those productions that we talked about, the TV series, the films, the documentaries, all those can be commissioned by somebody who can do one, quality control, check the quality of the content, the vetting, the scripts, all these things, which is something which currently doesn't exist. NBC, NFC, they don't have the capacity to do that. Why? Because they're not content creators, right? So in this case, you're bringing in somebody to take that risk, and we're saying to take that risk, we're gonna reimburse you somehow. Okay. Then this concessionaire has, as part of his PPP agreement, he's got rights with someone like NBC. That's why you need government, right? So what government then says is, through NBC, is that we'll avail these specific slots. We'll give you a slot from 6 o'clock till 8 o'clock, just before the news. It's dedicated for this program for the next 6 years or 10 years. We'll also give you this slot and that slot and that slot and that slot for your movies, this one for your grassroots, all that stuff. So now, this operator has got somewhere to play the movies, right? And then, as you know, when those shows play, there's commercial breaks, and that's possible revenue. So that revenue from the advertisers, we want to bring it into this model here. Why? Because NBC alone can't pay you enough to shoot quality content, right? So you need the revenue from the advertisers to complement this. So what happens? Your concessionaire goes and talks to advertisers. So in this case, MultiChoice will speak to FNB, Standard Bank, all these guys, and say, look, we're building this content. It's a massive amount of content. It's 500 minutes. We're going to employ so many jobs. Support us. Don't give us money. Just advertise. You're advertising already. You're advertising on billboards. Just direct your advertising into these slots on TV, and you get your same mileage. It's local content, so you're going to attract a lot of Namibian viewers. So local is king, right? So suddenly, this guy here takes the responsibility of bringing investors on board and does a profit share on the revenue that comes. So it might be 50-50, it might be 70-30, whatever the feasibility comes out and says. So what's happening now? This guy here is getting money from NBC for whatever rate per minute, $1,000, $1,500 per minute. And then he's also getting some money from advertisers in a profit share, maybe 50-50. So now there's two revenue streams, right? But you've transferred the risk to him. And then we know that even those two forms of income might still not be enough, at which point that's where that government support kicks in. So we talked about government putting in 10% of the money. That's where we see that 10% coming in. So government come on board with what we call a viability gap funding. It's a mechanism to make a program like this work. Governments around the world do this. South African government did this for Gautrain. Gautrain would not have been viable without a VGF, right? So Lesotho Hospital would not have been viable without a VGF. So it's done everywhere. Namibia understands this. Ministry of Finance is in charge of this act and this policy, so they can do it. So essentially the value proposition to government is, government, all you have to do is put up this top-up. And this top-up only goes in when this money is exhausted from NBC, this money is exhausted from the advertisers, and this guy has met all his KPIs. Only then do you give him that gap funding. Those KPIs are, we need you to train 3,000 people, proper qualifications, NQA. We need you to absorb those people. So after the training, give the guy one of the grassroots projects so that he can film something. After the grassroots project, give him a short film. After the short film, give him a feature film. After a feature film, you know what I mean? So you're taking the guy through various stages, and the capacity building is not passive. It's actually progressive. So you don't kill the filmmaker. And then at the bottom here, and then obviously this concessionaire will get access to financing. He'll partner with other people. So MultiChoice might partner with a company like Media. Media is a South African equipment supplier. And they could say, look, we bring down a whole host of kits for 2 years, for the first 2 years, to help stimulate the industry. Over time, we phase it out, and then we have local equipment coming in, right? At the bottom here, you then have various other elements, such as building a film hub or a film city, whatever you want to call it. But basically, you say to this guy, build infrastructure that allows us to shoot a lot of these films at that particular location. It's great for him because for 6 years, he's got a place to amortize his investment. You've got other partners as well that he brings on board. So we ask him to then say, develop a dedicated SVOD platform. Something like a Namibian Netflix, where all that content can then be put on so that beyond the NBC run, we know that that content is available somewhere, all right? And then secondly, we say, Mr. Operator, you can take this content and you can exploit it for another 3 years or 4 years or 5 years or whatever the period is. After which you give back the rights to the filmmaker. Why? Because it's important to retain your rights. So it might not be 5 years, it might be 2 years, depending on how this whole thing is finally structured. But what that does is it makes sure that by the time you're done, you've got money in your pocket, you've finished your production, it's aired. 2 years later, whatever the period is, you've got your content back and you can exploit it in other territories if you dub it, right? And that's at the core what this program looks like. I know it's a mouthful, and there's a lot. There's a lot more to it, right? But that's a short, concise explanation of what it is. And if you look at those challenges, we then start addressing quite a lot of them, from funding to markets to financing to capacity building to whatever it is. And if anything else comes on board, like incentives, great, it just makes this thing more bankable. If you get rebates, even better. Why? Because it just makes it more bankable, right? So you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, but you have one program that is, call it a flagship program. It gives big numbers. A lot of the number calculations were based on an average remuneration per month, with an understanding that a certain amount of a budget is spent on labor, and that would be like a typical KPI, right? Let me take some questions quickly before we move into the second program.
Good idea to take some questions.
Is this one?
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. It's a lot. Simple question. PPP stands for? Public?
Private partnership.
Public-private partition. Thank you. Partnership.
Partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pinashe. It so far is a very interesting presentation. I think just to give you some context and maybe how you shape the narrative when you go present this, you started off, and I know that you seemed disappointed with the 44 people that responded, but looking at the setup of the study, I would assume it's a mixed methodology, so you used a bit of quantitative and qualitative, but most of it is qualitative. So from a mixed methodology perspective, I think the qualitative number is quite good, given the fact that I think you said that the people members are 300, if I think you said so. So, and given your small budget, I think it is a reasonably good sample group, given the amount of data that you got. So I think when you do go present it, that you present it more in that light. And if they question the 44 that you're able to quantify, that is actually, although it's a mixed methodology, it leaned more on qualitative, hence the amount of feedback that you received. So that's just one. Then I also wanted to also really applaud you guys. I think it's important that, I mean, I'm new in the industry, but from what I know is that FAN was non-existent for a while, and then with the current board, you tried to bring some life in it, and that was towards the later part of the year. So given just, I mean, I think you said May, so given just in less than a month, you're able to come up with all these initiatives, I think it's commendable, given the fact that you are coming in an industry that was very divided, and it's gonna take time to pull everyone in the same direction. It's not gonna happen overnight. So I think it's important to understand that as well. And then also given, like I said now, with regards to the feedback that you received for the survey. Sorry, I just want to open my phone again for my notes so I don't deviate. Then I wanted to find out, with this program, I think there was a conversation I had where it would be so great if Namibian filmmakers can actually collaborate on maybe, let's say, releasing 2 really big or 1 big blockbuster that would really showcase what Namibia can offer. And a follow-up with that is, there was this whole talk about a Hollywood for Namibia, where I think there was talks of turning Ramatex into like a Hollywood studio where, you know, people can film. I think Oluder, it's one of the 2 places. So I don't know if that's also part of the program that you're going to unpack. And if not, maybe that's also something that we can really look into, a studio where people can just come and get artifacts. I think Joel is here. I've heard that he has a whole warehouse with old Oshiwambo type of stuff. So if there's things that we can preserve or have that are in these warehouses, that would also be a good one. And in terms of data, I think one of the, I'm just thinking from the top of my head, is that films that are especially going to be part of this program, that it would be mandatory for them to provide that data. So that you immediately, so basically once you, one of the prerequisite is that you would then give how many people were employed, how many did you pay, so all that you would have already set up the questionnaires that they would then have to answer as part of their reporting. I think that would then make it more easier to get the data. And then lastly, sorry, just hold on. The training. So I recently I've been seeing call outs for training, but they have like time lapse on, you need to be a certain age. Like some of us are getting into the industry way after 40. And there's this whole thing about the youth and 35. So I'm just wondering, can there not be so many age limits? Because there are people with different ages in the industry, it's not just young people. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you want to address that first? Yeah. Okay, let's take one more.
I've just got one statement, really, about, I think you had a problem with the amount of players in the data collection. The survey was a bit thin, in my opinion. It did create, obviously, the data you required to start this process. But for me, the multiplier effect is not a new thing. You can speak to the elders here. We've been speaking about this for centuries, trying to explain to our leaders how the multiplier effect works. We are not the only country with this problem. There are how many countries on the planet that can be compared to Namibia, politically, social politically, etc. Therefore, I don't believe that this data doesn't exist and we don't have a place or a place to come from. The data does exist. There's many papers written about the multiplier effect in other countries. And if we can find a comparative example where our government, who we're pitching to explain this process or this concept, can say, yes, we are like Mauritius. Yes, we are like Botswana. And yes, these things have worked. Then we don't have to draw information from our own people who might be dispersed over a much larger area. And the disparity in Namibia is our biggest challenge. It can only be sorted with education. So we're going to have to work to supporting education as filmmakers. I think that's going to be part of our key role in the development process of this country. So I think when you start to say the data's thin, you're not helping our cause. I think you should dig deeper and find the data for us, or we should help you find this data, even if it's not within our own borders. But I believe that data exists and our case is strong. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think, Nasha, you can quickly address those and then we can take.
Okay, super. Yeah, very good comments and questions. So I do acknowledge that the comment around the data, I think partly it's a product of our own doing, right? Because I think we don't do enough work to collect the data as well. And I'd be keen to know how many people actually do a proper closeout report at the end of their film, where you sit down and you actually really analyze that information. I think a lot of us at the end of the production, you just want to get it out of your hair, and that process of sitting down and actually running it all over again doesn't really exist. And I think that's where a lot of the gaps come from. I do agree that the survey was also thin, and that was because the concern was that you may have a lot of data gaps because we know that the info is not there. I do also agree that the industry is at an infant stage. Infant being that it was dormant and it's reviving, and I do think for the time that's been done or that's passed, a lot of work has happened, right? I think the problem with a lot of this work is that you actually can't see it. It's not tangible. A lot of times people want results and they want to see, here are the jobs, here are the movies. But a lot of this is a lot of underground work, a lot of lobbying, and a lot of structuring, which you don't really see. And I agree. I think one of the KPIs in a program like this is the data submission. So the operator in here, part of these KPIs would be, we want all this data for everything that's being done. For every dollar that's spent, we want to understand exactly where it went to, full financial records, because automatically what it does is it gives you a nice big database of info, from TV series to documentaries, and whatever other info we want, we can actually sort of prescribe it right up front. The age limits for training, I've also seen that as well. But I think a program like this can address it. Because the program is obviously still at an infancy stage, one can be specific that we want it to be open, certain preferred groups, and that's something that you can easily build in. The comment around sort of a Ramatex and a studio. So when I hear plans like that, I switch off, right? Because I know it's not possible. Government doesn't work like that. And private industry doesn't also work like that. So why would anybody come and invest hundreds, millions of Namibian dollars into a Ramatex to shoot movies? For who? There's no incentives here. Where's the advantage? If I'm an investor and I'm looking globally now, and I've got 100 million, I'd go to Cape Town. I'd go to South Africa, Joburg. I get 40%. For every dollar I spent, I get 40 cents back, automatically, just by using the locals. I don't get that here. So why would I do a Ramatex? You know what I mean? I can't see government doing that either. Government spending money to say we're going to kit out this whole area for filmmakers to come and shoot. Who controls it? Who manages it? You know what I mean? So I struggle to see how that can be operationalized. And there's been talks. There was one about Walfish Bay of building. I know NIDA was involved, and they wanted to build a film city, and it's back on the cards again. But I've seen a lot of those things. They always say we need private sector to come in. Private sector doesn't work like that. Private sector is saying, where's my return on investment? What drives the investment? If the content is not there and you've got all those challenges in your sector, why should I come and spend the money there?
Hello? But the reason I'm bringing it up is because we are discussing this, and part of some of these issues are regulatory issues. And I think you did mention it around the issue of tax rebates and so on, because I'm thinking that the reason why there is a lot of films and so on in Cape Town and Joburg and Durban is because they have such places. So, I mean, if the government or wants to see really the true value of it, it's also then investing in infrastructure. It's an infrastructure issue, which then would be backed up by regulations. Hence this discussion now.
Yeah. So the reason why I still think because the rebates are a process that's happening, right? So there's what the colleagues were talking about are the special economic zones. So special economic zones are SEZs, And basically they're like tax havens. So typically you then get your taxes back. But like I'm saying, I can get 40% in South Africa. My taxes here is 15%. Do I come here? But then I also need that piece of legislation to be in place. I need it to be enacted, and I need it to be clear around how do I get it, what's the timeline, et cetera, et cetera. So it could take quite a little bit of time. I think if the conversation is around private sector and private sector bringing investment, you need to speak the language of private sector, right? Because private sector is not here to build a Ramatex. They're here to make money. At the core of it, they'll come here to make money. Whether we like it or we don't like it, Netflix is in the business of making money, so is Showmax, so is all these things. If they don't make money, they lose money. But if you can make sure that they make money, and as part of them making money, we get the infrastructure, we get the training, we get all these things, then I'm saying that's a great win. So in this model, you'll see at the bottom right here, we talked about a film hub. It could be a Ramatex. But the value proposition is that we'll give you access to Ramatex, and you can run this program from there. So to lower the production costs, use Ramatex. Use a place, we reduce your rental to a minimal amount, and then you bring your equipment there. But what's driving him to do that investment is not the fact that he's trying to build the industry. It's because he wants a return, right? So give him the return with the understanding that you're leveraging his investment. It's a 500 million program. US government are putting 10% of that. So you're leveraging off private sector investment. So that's the logic. And then I think the last comment was just around the multiply effects. So I agree. And I mean, we struggle with this in a lot of the projects that we do transaction advisory for. So normally what we do is we build a financial model, and then from our financial model, we build our economic model. But we use what we call shadow tariffs, shadow exchange rates. So we then take international rates and we say for every $1 that's spent, if you benchmark it against your World Bank index or tariff or exchange rate or a South African one, if they do have one, it translates to X amount. So that's the ultimate exercise to do. But it's never accurate because there's so many inefficiencies there. So for instance, if you take a shadow tariff from South Africa, they've got incentives. So it distorts a lot of your data. Other countries have got other types of benefits which distorts your data. So it's always better to do it firsthand, but for the purpose of this report, it is using shadow tariffs to exchange the data. So basically benchmarking other jurisdictions.
All right. Let's take Joel and the gentleman behind. He had a mic before, Joel, but now since you have it, you can go on with your first. Yeah, Joel, go on, and then the gentleman at the back. I see Cecil also have got a hand, and after Cecil, we go on with the presentation and continue with the questions.
Thank you very much, and also from my side, congratulations. I think what we have done is something to be proud of. That is coming from somebody who, for many years, also been involved in on different levels in different data collection, Creative Industry Guide being one of them. So we are having this conversation because that new board, well, you're not new anymore. The current board took initiative, and you have came this far. So for that, congratulations. Just a number of things. I just maybe want to share some concrete examples. One, and I think it's something I struggled with personally, as in the years when we were part of the fan board, team was with us then, and also when I was at the Film Commission. I think it's very important perhaps to, and I'm speaking not necessarily having a concrete solution at this point, but I think it has been a problem then, and I think it's continued to be the case, is to try to find a language that does justice to different segments of our film industry. What do I mean by that? On one hand, we're speaking business, numbers, and there might be some of us in the room who knows and interested, or following this conversation. But also there's, again, half of the industry, maybe even more, who I just want to make my film, I just want funding. All these numbers are just really confusing for me. What my observation is that it has been quite a delay over the years when we try to combine those two distinct audience, in having these conversations. And this is not coming from a place of, say, let's further divide and segregate the industry. It's really, let's make an effort to understand different audience within our industry and sort of like try to, because if that doesn't happen, and in my, again, using the example is, over the years, some of the stuff that you were mentioning there, in terms of employment, every production that we do, we collect this data. We put the numbers out there. In fact, some of the numbers were some of the few numbers that the government, different department of the government are using to take the conversation forward. But we are also isolated in this because we haven't really succeeded in trying to align with individuals and organizations that are trying to push this conversation. It's very important and very urgent. But also the other conversation about the people who just, look, I just want to be trained. I just want to get employed. I just want to, So now you have this mix of often, this is, by the way, is very common, but often very highly charged of somebody say, look, I need incentive to bring in more business, and somebody here, but you didn't pay me from the last job. So I just want to bring it up again that this is really important. Both views are very important, but I think we need to find a way to address them. And that would get us really further, because maybe even to link it to the current or incoming leadership, they are so keen to incorporate the film industry, but they are coming in from the point of numbers. They're saying, okay, listen guys, we promised 500,000 jobs. What can you do to provide these jobs? Okay, so we need to filter through ourselves to say who are the voices that can articulate this and what datas. And this shouldn't be so hard, because the moment you go like this, there are companies that I know that would be very happy to come on board. Unfortunately, also this kind of data collection, they suffer because usually the people that have information, they are on the ground working. When there's a meeting, we're shooting in Orange River, we are, and sometimes people feel like, okay, these guys, they don't care about fan or whatever, but we are also the people that keeping the industry going. We are the people keeping people employed. So there's also that reality there, and see how we navigate that as well. That's that. There's something I wanted to comment as well, because my master's was also studying how to, looking at sustainable way of the Namibian film industry. And what I found then, and I think still remain to be relevant today, is that it's so expensive to make a film in Namibia. Why? Because one, there's gaps between this film and the next one. And also there's gap from the people, especially the qualified one. The last job was, 2023, and they don't know when is the next job's going to be. So therefore, they are charging and everything, it's around that. And because it's that expensive, it's also very difficult for NBC to afford you. So therefore, that's why I like one of the recommendations of the series, because what it does is speak to frequency, frequent skill development, production of content, and we are likely to, reduce the cost in that sense. But perhaps just in addition to that, something that which works for us as a private business, we started to centralize. When you centralize, it becomes cheaper. What do I mean? There's a lot of companies that are producing, and isolating here and there. But imagine if there was a scenario where all of us, sort of like the central place where we're operating from, one, you're sharing cost of security, cost of rental, cost of insurance, and the list goes on. And by doing so, you also then, if you are inviting any representative from the government, they're looking at this one massive thing. See, I don't know where the idea of it should just be Joel, but when they go through this, they go through the editing room, and this is Heiko. They go through the camera equipment, and this is Armas, and they go through like that, So when we started with a warehouse, which we have probably, but in the moment, the biggest when it comes to props and costume, and it's from different culture, and the focus was the early years, because truth be told, you cannot tell any historical film without those things, okay? And that is that. Sorry, I'm now just feel like I'm talking too much, but there's so much to say. But and then just commenting on incentives. Very commendable that we're pushing for it, but we also have to be careful. What we realize now, especially us who work a lot with also international production, whether it's a film or commercial, often what happens, money comes, money goes. And we have the data to share with you. And it goes because often, though when those international productions coming, you're renting pretty much everything from outside. And then often the skill above also is coming from outside. And sometimes it's also, you're dealing with a really strange contract, which says, you know, this is, you know, you have to bring these people. If you're forcing your own people, if they mess up, then it's on you. So, and you have nothing to fall on. There's nobody to support you in that sense. You are literally on your own. So when we're talking about the incentive to really do justice to us, we need to have also other elements in place, because the Namibian government could decide for whatever reason that they will make money available to attract this international movie, and they will come. But I can tell you, those international production will come, they take the money and they go. So there is that very much there. So that's just to say, I think there's a lot of things that happen. In training, there's one other suggestion I wanted to say. When it comes to training, I'm going to throw some people in the space here. I know, Cecil, over the years, you dealt with a lot of people in terms of training and getting these people from this level to another level. I think there's really an opportunity here to learn from those experiences. And I know also Collective, they've been producing, and now I'm putting Tim on the spotlight, they've been producing also deal with a different individual, and I think that's such an opportunity to collect data. Data in terms of not only available skills, but also where their gears are, and how can we make sure that this gears continues, because we're also killing each other's business, because if we don't hire her camera, then maybe her next job is only in 2 years, and by then there's another camera and it's even cheaper, and we just basically, this is, you know, so, and that now speaks to what Rob said about continuing to operate in this fragmented environment. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, and through FEN, in fact, FEN has been always that one space that brings everybody together. But as long as you take into account, I guess for the FEN to be effective is also to really understand the ecosystem, understand the challenge on the ground, that if Tim now had to produce, I don't know how many, 10 films, and there's a FEN meeting and it doesn't come, and you know, of course, you have to move on with what you have, but you missed a big opportunity for data. Maybe there's another way of trying to reach out to, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, it's those data are very, very important as well. But if we're missing those who are out there, but unfortunately, those people that have to be there because they are working. Thank you, sorry, and I apologize, I've been speaking now.
Thank you, Joel.
Good evening, everyone. Walked in a bit late. I know I missed a lot, but I've definitely picked up a lot in the time that I've been here. And a few points came to mind. 4. Number 1 is end consumer. Sometimes as filmmakers, as people who produce things, even, and I've seen it in the Namibian context, we don't really answer the question as to who is this film intended for, right? That's what I've noticed. We make or films are made, it's put out there, but then, you know, at the end of the day, even prior to production or prior to even pre-production, the question of who is this film intended for is not answered. Even if you look at the bigger guys, the Walt Disneys, the what have yous, they make animations, and even before they do that, the question of who is it intended for is answered. And the thing is, you know, the film is made, and at the end of the day, it reaches the target audience. So one thing I've noticed is we don't have a target audience, and maybe we need to start looking at that. Not necessarily so much to capture a local audience, because I know Jesus did say a prophet in his hometown has no honor. So maybe it's about time we start making films to attract the outside world. You know, for outside. Think global, act local. Which leads me to my second point. Someone brought about the building of a studio, etc., etc. It's a bit of a two-pointer for me. I mean, it's both a good thing and not so much so, because it's a good thing, number one, because yes, it allows you to sort of create smaller productions, allow you to make smaller mistakes or make mistakes on a small scale before you build onto something big. But at the end of the day, it leads on to the negative side, taking away the naturalness of a film, if that makes sense. You know, there's so much that Namibia has to offer. I know, why is it that, you know, you want to shoot, say, a restaurant scene in an artificial space when you can actually go outside and someone will recognize, oh, that's Independence Avenue down there, for example. Number three is so, I mean, back to point number two is, it's a good idea, but then, you know, you sort of need to ask the question of why, right? Why do we need an artificial, or why do we need a studio space? Is it because we can't get this type of scene somewhere else, or, you know, what's the issue? Number three, point number three, I know you've addressed it already, but, and I really just want to second the lady's notion on the issue of ageism. I mean, passion hits people at different ages, and people, you know, things strike people at a different time in life. And what I've noticed is, and it will lead on to my fourth point, is what I've noticed is that because of the age cap that organizations have placed on trainings and participations, etc., it has led to the industry being gate-kept. Younger people or newer people, or whether young or old, want to get involved in certain things, but they can't. Why? Because there is a certain age gap. Now, for those who were probably part of a training program or film production, you know, they already went through the cycle. Now you find that the same faces and the same names are being used on a film production. So you have this negative recycling of things. And this new person who sort of sparked, in whom an interest is sparked, can't express their talent or can't learn new skills or can't be a part of this thing because of the age cap. And then we wonder why our film industry dies. It all starts with there. As soon as you start to restrict something from somebody, then the negative recycling continues and you don't have a succession plan. And then 5-10 years later, the people who were at the forerunner are looking back and saying, but why is nobody following us? It's because you restricted us. And I kept it at that. I've marked my 4 points. Thank you.
All right. Before we go on, Ben, can I humbly request that we just hold a little bit the questions and then Panashe's response to those questions, because we have Mr. Ronald here, who is our representative on the NFC board, and he is quickly running to some other important engagements. Is it fine? Oh, should we continue? Okay, then it's fine. Right, then we go to Cecil quickly, and then we come back to Panashe.
There's also a question online, but I think maybe Panashe, you can first go ahead and then, yeah. But I would also just like us to, I think there's some questions. Is it on? Okay. There are some questions that I think we'll be able to answer later on. I think for now, if we can stick to this specific topic, it would be ideal. We will make some time for further conversation, I promise, at the end of it. So we might not answer all of the questions unless if it's pertaining to this. Oh.
Yeah, very correct. Let's quickly stick to questions related to this, and we will create a platform for a lot more engagements. Cecil, on this one. Microphone for Cecil. Vice.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the question online.
Okay, cool. Just very quickly, thank you so much for the presentation. I think finalize is something I can rally behind, that I can really throw my weight in behind and stuff, because yeah, there's a lot of thought in it, and it is about government, and it's about talking to government, not talking to film. You know, sometimes we think when we talk to filmmakers, we have the answers, but that's, you know, how do you say, preaching to the converted stuff. It's about talking to government, and I love what you did, and I love how you guys came up with this, and I love everything here, except I saw that in your presentation that you talked about production funding, and you talk about production, including post-production. I need to make a very serious case for development funding. In fact, development funding means, and the way I see it, is for every 10 scripts we develop, 5 ends up in production. We should have that kind of ratio, because we need a lot of writers. We need a lot of things to produce all that stuff. We need a lot of directors, whatever, producers, all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, and whatever, any movie can only exist in the markets based on the quality. And because we have we tend to think that because I wrote a script, it's good. You know, understand? And we tend to think because I wrote it twice, it's even better. You gotta write it 20 times over. And there needs to be the right kind of input in that 20 times to help you get there, that make the conversation simple and accessible to the viewer. And that's something that, development is something that we need even more than production. Because production doesn't just start with picking up the camera. It really starts with developing the ideas. And there needs to be, I don't know, maybe make it 520 million, that we have like 4 million a year or whatever for just development, because that is really important. Because if it's well developed, it will travel, no matter what the market, no matter what the audience wants, it will travel. Thank you very much.
Just a quick one, Pinasha and team. What I also would probably, I didn't see here, I see that it says platform cinema. If we want, I don't know if Namibia really has a culture yet throughout the country to attending cinema productions, especially in the regions. And so again, when we are producing this grassroots or local content, especially the fact that we are now increasing the quota on cultural, that government or this program really looks at, I don't want to say building, or maybe using some of the community centers or the MICT centers in the regions, and turning that also into platforms where people can go and watch movies. Or it's not a, yeah, I don't know how I don't know how we're going to develop it, but also starting to develop a culture of watching things at cinemas and going out. Or even this, I think they used to call it bioscope or something, where you have an open field and then you set up. And then usually, I mean, if you start it from when the kids are young through schools and stuff, obviously they develop into it. But I'm just thinking for the regions, how do we then develop that so that they can consume that content and not just on NBC if they don't have TV, for example?
Right. Thank you very much for the questions. Panache, you can address those questions and then just continue with the presentation until the end, so we can
Wrap up.
we can talk later.
Okay, so I think some questions are actually fan questions, which I think the board can tackle. I'll tackle the ones related specifically to the program. So I think at the top end, I think Joel mentioned some stuff around aligning people and obviously the business side of film. And I think that's an important part, that's an important component that this program will try and address, right? Because ultimately what you're doing is you're forcing the filmmakers to look at it from that lens. Because you're saying, here's my pre-sale, I can give you 2 million for this film. go and make it work. But he's not giving it to you and walking away, right? This guy is taking you on and is forced to incubate you because of the KPIs. So he'll ask you to produce a business plan. He'll train you on producing a business plan for a film. He'll help you produce your schedules. They'll train all that stuff. So the idea is to use a program like this, that you create a sandbox that allows one to learn how to do a sort of quality productions, but at the same time as well, find that nexus and that balance between ensuring that it's conforming, working within a budget, making sure that, you know, because the money won't just be given. If you go to the bank, for instance, the bank won't, if someone's going to buy your movie for 2 million, the bank won't give you 2 million up front, right? The bank is going to ask for a business plan. They're going to want to know, what's your drawdown schedule? When do you need it? How do we make sure that the money we're giving you is being used properly? There'll be some conditions precedent. And that's how the world works, you know, when they fund film, right? So the bank will want to know, for instance, so I can give an example. They'll typically build in, for instance, CPs in the lending. So say MultiChoice is the operator. They give you the green light to shoot a feature film, and they say, let's say 2 million, right? Within that 2 million, you'll have a portion that's for pre-production. You'll have a portion for development, which will take you until script developed. But the bank will typically say, for that, you only need maybe 20%, whatever you've pitched. And at that point, they'll have a gate where MultiChoice will need to give them a green light to say, yes, we're happy with the script and it's still in line with what we expect, such that it de-risks their project. And then only once that's in place, then they'll say, okay, move on to the next one. If you're a very amateur producer, they might even say, listen, we want you to use 1 or 2 heads to make sure that the quality is done properly. And then they'll typically have somebody on set that makes sure that the QA and all these things are sort of done properly. But in the back end, on the finance side, you then have a whole accounting system that's also running, that's actually required to follow the business plan to draw down. So I think by incubating, you have a better chance of getting people to understand that nexus and that balance between what's the financial or the business side of the industry. But I do agree that I think we need to break the silos, and that alignment is important to get between the right people. And I do think the conversation we're having now, at a time like now, is so prime, right? Because, like I said, it's the perfect storm if there ever is, because government is going through these changes. There is a sudden interest in the creative space. Film can take the lead in it. As an industry, we're organized. You know, we've got some voices that can relay our views. That if a Tim is not available to attend a meeting, at least you have somebody that can sit in that meeting with the right experience, whether it's from the facilitation side all the way to the actual film shooting side of things. And I think it's a very strategic position that FAN is actually in, because you've got representation in the government. In NFC, you've got 2 of the 5 representatives, right? You've got the industry's voice. You're sitting on the NIPDB task forces. Anyone that wants something is coming here. So I think for the first time, there's very good alignment. And also with work with government, I think there's a lot of changes that will come, which will probably come out in the next 2 weeks or so, around where does film sit. But right now in the NDP, it's sitting under a sort of arts space. So I think that alignment is happening naturally, but it could happen faster. You talked about, okay, time. All right, so I'll move quickly. Incentives, I think there was conversation around money comes and goes. Fully agree with that. To drive incentives, it must be very clear. But once again, coming back to the program, we can be very intentional about it, right? We can make sure that as much money stays. So you can make it a KPI as part of the contract to say that 60% of the 500 million goes to labor, and we want to see it. We want to see actual pay slips for people being paid. We want actual proof of payments. You can enforce it. Like I said, this is a global practice. It can be done. And if you don't do it, sorry, we hold back your payment, right? So we can control that element. There was talk around equipment. So on the equipment side, there is a tab at the bottom there that touches on the equipment. And there's different ways you can do the equipment, right? So a lot of times you can't amortize the value of the equipment. So if I want to buy an Arri camera, it costs 1.5 million, right? For an Alexa 35, the lenses will cost me another $1 million. I can never have a production that can cover that cost. If that Arri has got 3 years work on a TV series, suddenly it makes sense, right? Because I can pay for it on a monthly basis with an off-take from a MultiChoice. If MultiChoice says, look, we'll hire your Arri, you go buy it, we'll hire it from you, and then you have it on the weekends as an example to shoot your other stuff. Suddenly, I've got access to market for my equipment, which I can pay off during the program. You can do the same for lights, you can do the same for cameras. The operator would love that as well because he doesn't have to buy that stuff all up front, right? And the requirement is that you look after the equipment. So there's many ways that one can address the gaps that exist in the industry now with equipment, especially if you're doing 4 TV series. I mean, 4 TV series, I don't know how many cameras you need, you know, and the same for all the other equipment. Then there was a comment around end user, who's your audience. So a lot of that stuff will be tackled by the program because the operator, a MultiChoice, knows who their audience is. So if they're procuring your content, they know who's their market, right? They'll do the research, they'll do the analysis, and they'll tell you that the content that you're writing won't speak to the market and won't speak to the advertiser. And that's the risk you put on them because within the KPIs, you build it that we as NBC, we want a certain amount of viewership for those slots. So if you can't give me those viewerships, we've got a problem. So it then becomes important for the operator to make sure he understands what does the market want, what type of stories do they want, and relay those stories onto the platforms. You talked about a studio, why a studio? So if you do TV series, I get the naturalness that comes with being able to travel, but it's expensive, right? You can imagine if you're trying to do a TV series and you don't have a fixed location, it kills the budget. If you watch any TV series that you can think of, Generations all the way to Isidingo, they typically have 1 or 2 locations where they shoot 60% of the production there. Why? Because it's easy. They've got access to it. They can film constantly. So a studio allows you to do that. If you've got a studio and you're doing 4 TV series, you build 4 sets there. For a year or 2 years, you're shooting from there. You still go out to shoot your pickup scenes, but the bulk of it, you do it in one location such that you lower production costs. Otherwise, it's just not feasible to shoot everything outside. Why? Because you do 2 or 3 scenes a day. In a studio, you're doing 10, 15 scenes easily because it's controlled environment. You can work at night. You don't need permits all the time. So there's easy benefits of having a studio. And we're not opposed to it. We're saying, how do we make it in such a way that it's sustainable, but it speaks to the issues on the ground and addresses the bigger elements. We talked about, should I skip the last one there? Okay. All right. And then just the last one, I think just around pre-production, post-production, I definitely think there's from a content point of view, you know, to do 50,000 minutes worth of content, it means you've shot easily 200,000 minutes, right? 400,000 minutes. So the cameramen are busy. The writers are writing nonstop. I mean, just the TV series alone, you're writing literally every single day. And that's why you'll see the mix of the program, the bulk is TV. Because TV's got that continuous editing, continuous writing, continuous story development, continuous this film, slightly different. Even the numbers on the film don't make as much sense. So I think that whole pre and post-production, we can localize a lot of that, and we can make that mandatory in the KPIs that we want 90% of the writers to be coming from here. And you can do it on a sliding scale, right? It doesn't have to be from the beginning. You can say in year 1, you can have 70% of the writers from here, bring in expert writers. In year 2, increase it to 80%, but reduce yours to 20. Year 3, we want 90. By year 4, we want 100% of the writing being done here. What does that do? It allows you to learn from the other guys and allows you to build up content that's still strong, but it gives us that learning curve that's so needed. You can do the same on the post, right? Okay. I know in the interest of time, I need to wrap up. And like I said, this thing is so layered. And unfortunately, we don't have all the time in the world, but you will have a copy of the sorry, I'm trying to share again. I don't know why it keeps ending. Okay. And at the core of it, like I said, this is not even the full study, right? This is just a preliminary layout. Normally what happens with this is you go through a full feasibility study, you understand all these numbers in so much detail, Treasury needs to allocate some money. So there is a lot of work that would still happen with this. But at the core of it, that's the approach and that's the model. I'm not going to go into these elements, but ultimately you're producing content, you're bringing in infrastructure, you're addressing capacity building, you're addressing the market, you have a sustainable model because over time, the advertisers and the TV slots ultimately take over, right? So at some point, the concessionaire gets out and the guys have got the equipment, they've got the know-how, they're able to produce content at a price that the broadcaster is willing to pay for, and your industry carries on. And then obviously the last one is that ownership. It's important that everyone that is part of the program, all 50,000 minutes belong to us such that you can further exploit that content. There's a bunch of benefits which I won't cover, but at the core of it, it's risk sharing. So government wants to always know what's the value proposition. In this case, you transfer a lot of risk to the operator. He wants to be reimbursed for it, and we're saying give him his reimbursement, but let's make sure we get our pounds worth of flesh. And then obviously you leverage off his expertise, he's innovative, he helps shape your stories, it's sustainable, it's transparent, wada wada. And then just the last slide then just talks to some of these considerations. This is a bit on the technical side, but this is really what Ministry of Finance would look at when they look at a program like this. So it's key, we call them value for money drivers. Why would you do a program like this? Government wants to do this. If you look at the SWAPO manifesto, NDP, they are saying we want PPPs. We're saying this is a PPP, guys, come on board. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to let...
What? Yep. Thank you very much, Panashe. Earlier on, I think the Vice Chairperson spoke about how much time and how much the quotations that we got when this idea came up, that some of them, the cheapest one was about $1 million, and the rest went up. We went around the cheaper route, as the chairman said, to find people that will do it for us at a very little amount. You will not even believe if we tell you. That's the team that we finally got to put together to come up with this beautiful product. But I think Panashe and his Monjila team deserve really a big round of applause because they had to come on board to assist us, and he personally sacrificing his family time to spend hours and hours with us to work on this paper at no cost at all. He volunteered, and some of his own staff members volunteered as well. One of the ladies is here with us. They did this at no cost at all. Please, let us give them a round of applause. Right, and before we, in the interest of time, before we go ahead, there are some questions that have been asked, especially online. And I just wish to say, in the interest of time, we will probably see if we have got time at the end of the agenda to address those questions. But if we don't, we are working on an idea of something that might come up in the next week, 2 weeks or 3, where we want us to get together, us, Joel, Cecil, or whoever have got a short film to screen. We screen those short films, and we just, we can call it industry bring and buy. We watch a short film, and then we can have more of these kind of engagements. So please bear with us with those questions that will remain unanswered. We'll keep record of them, and we can bring them back on the table on that specific day or night. Thank you very much. Now we will hand over to the Vice Chairperson to take us really through the reason why this gathering was called. That is the discussion around is it, did I jump something? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, Chairperson, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, Comrade Chair, due to circumstance. Okay, so we wanted to look at program 2, and that's the reason why I'm here now, Honorable Secretary. In short, we've touched on some of the aspects of this program already in the introduction. And if you don't mind, because this is a more familiar type of program as opposed to the one that we had to go through now, that PPP model. Essentially what this is what some of you guys have done in previous years. I think you call them bubble gum movies. And just to summarize, sorry for not completely following the presentation. So in its essence, the idea is there to create short films in every region. Obviously going through a mentorship process and a training program in each region. The mentors and the trainers will have to come from the filmmakers body, from you guys. You will have to go and give your skills to these newcomers in the industry. We are hoping to do this at least twice a year per region to get these short stories out. What then essentially happens with this is, yes, the people are getting practice on grassroots level. And when we're talking about grassroots, we're talking about indigenous languages, indigenous cultures being represented in that regard, in that particular case. So that's what the RCCP, Regional Content Creation Plan, essentially looks at in its essence. But also at the core of it is something that the smarter people was actually capable of harnessing, of capturing, which is how to turn this concept into an economic model. That has always been the challenge for us. It needs to be viable. So whereas on the one hand, the RCCP does deal with the developmental aspect of the industry, bottom-up approach, it feeds into a viable ecosystem or economic framework, if you please, in terms of that. So that is just to summarize the program. And do forgive me, we will share more of these. We can go through key pillars, all these nice words that we'll be using to explain. Yes, we will create content. It's going to develop what is our national identity. Our stories will be there. We can talk about those things. But I think at the core of tonight, there was quite a few other things that we needed to get to. So if the floor would allow me just to skim over this one quickly. It's bubblegum movies, guys. We're going to make 28 of them in a year. If you don't mind, we're going to get funding for that, but it needs to be attached to this viable economic model where government is not just throwing the money into the water for development. If we can, and now, Honorable Chair, you can jump over me.
All right, thank you very much, Chairman. Right, Honorable Vice, please, the introduction has been done. The floor is yours.
So just while I open up further notes, so the next point on the agenda is basically the Constitution, right? So we have been at it since, May last year? And in May, it's going to be a full year. And obviously, as you can see, there's a lot of work that's been happening in the pipeline, or the work that's just basically in the pipeline. And there's a lot of things that we've already started doing, and we're only halfway there. And I'm not so sure if everybody knows, but the FAN Constitution only currently allows a sitting board to reign for 1 year. So now, as you can imagine, the first 3 to 4 months, you're still finding momentum, you're still finding the feet, the board is still getting to know each other, they're still trying to find each other's, strong points. But essentially, I think we had this discussion with the board and some members as well, and also with the NFC as well, to say, is it really, does it make sense to have a board only reign for 1 year and still be impactful at the same time within the space of 12 months, minus the 3 months where you're actually still trying to find feet? I'm not so sure how it worked with the previous board. I'm not so sure if you guys, through just the AGM, you decided to just continue with things, or were there any decisions sort of like that were made afterwards? Please go ahead. Mr. Tim, where's the floor mic?
Essentially, where it comes from is that
And that's where the constitutional change was made to make it 12 months, the period of the board, to ensure whenever the board is serving, you actually have people that want to do this job. That lapsed after 3 years. And that was literally the discovery that it needs to, there we go, that it needs to actually be shortened. I don't necessarily think there's an issue to revisit this, but maybe it needs to be something where the leadership every year has to be confirmed by the membership. You know, I don't know if you want to add.
No, I just want to add, I think it's also a question of how we look at this. I think maybe, my opinion on this would be that maybe we don't necessarily have to change it. We should just allow for the membership to just, if they're really happy with the people, to just, it's fine for you guys to continue. I think this was the thinking, because then that way you are not stuck to wait 3 years before people can go out. So I think if we were to get an opportunity to revote you guys, I'm tempted to speak on behalf of everybody, but I think chances are really high that we're gonna say, yes, please continue.
Well, and maybe last one on that, it also gives you as the board the opportunity to say after 12 months, okay, sorry, I no longer want to be the treasurer. Instead of being caught in that position for 36 months or 3 years, and then just stopping to deliver. You know, that's where the initial thinking came from. But yeah, I think your membership will support you.
Okay. We thought about that as well, as to say, okay, let's maybe not, chain people for 3 years. But at the same time, I think the Constitution does allow for resignation as well. So I think provision for that is made. But the other issue that we had was you've got the NFC board as well, where you have representatives from the sitting board to represent a certain vision or objective of the sitting, board. And the NFC tenure is 5 years. It's 3 years now. Okay, so yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to align with those 3 years, so that not only do we carry through the objective of the sitting board, but also so that we can hold them accountable to the vision. But in the case of somebody wanting to resign, I mean, obviously, there's provision made for that. You have another AGM or SGM and you vote in another treasurer, for example. But
brought up. Sorry. Thank you. The few times where membership were not happy with the fan board, it's not that people want to resign and they were not allowed. It's people who are not showing up and just sticking around. And we have to wait 3 years for us to vote another one. So there's also, and this is even more damaging, to be honest. So, but I do, especially with regard to the NFC representative, I think that's an important point. Maybe one can think of those who are representative of the NFC to have them some sort of a special case. But really, previously when FEN was dormant, it was really a case of people, they are there. They're just not showing up, they're just not reaching out, there's just nothing happening. Until 3 years later, you have to do the same ritual of appointing a new board.
absolutely, and that's also something that we picked up as well on our end. So I think that sort of like speaks to the third point amendment here, where we want to introduce KPIs and accountability measures within the Constitution. It can be in the form of a separate annexure. It doesn't have to be necessarily part of a Constitution amendment, but there has to be like a referral to a certain KPI, key performance indicators, or just measurable accountability methods, right? Obviously, everybody has got a portfolio within the associate or within the board, right? And under each one's portfolio, there has to be key milestones, even annually. It doesn't even have to be for the 3 years, but just annually. And if those annual KPIs are not met by a certain board member, we then refer back to the members, we give a report, and based on that report, we then give a vote of no confidence. Because I think the board obviously has to to suggest or to at least sort of propose the idea based on the findings, based on that report. And then collectively with the members, one can then make that decision to say, okay, how do we say vote of no confidence? Shuna has not been performing in the last year. She was supposed to do X, Y, and Z, but she only managed to do X. So how do we move forward with this? Do we give another chance? And also you give the board member to maybe perhaps justify their current position and their lack of delivery. So I think it's very important that one introduces that. I think for us, even internally, it helps us. Because sometimes, you slack and then you still also want to still continue, but you're basically dead wheat in the grass, and that's what we're trying to avoid as well. Not just for the current board, also just in future. I think even just for the next board, if they have a list of KPIs that they can tweak here and there, considering that will be a separate annexure, that will then allow, some accountability. So I think, so like I said, the tenure is one thing that we wanted to address and see how do we amend that to also just, align with the NFC board tenure. But today, unfortunately, we don't have a quorum, even with the online guests, and these are just suggestions that we will throw to everybody. And then perhaps we can suggest one or two ways as to how to vote on these amendments and move forward accordingly, because this requires some legal assistance and some legal guidance as well as input as to how we can do these amendments and have them be constitutional. So also there are sort of like terminologies that we want to review within the current constitution, and we want to maybe just elaborate on some of them, because I think there are one or two loopholes, but we would definitely have to also consult the people who were part of establishing the constitution. So it's not something that the board would sit on their own with a lawyer next to them, but I think that we need to give a chance to the people who actually set up the constitution, to give them a chance to actually explain what they meant with some of these terminologies and points within the constitution. But yeah. I think Orbit and Vixen, Mr. Vixen were part of it. No, if I'm not mistaken.
But I think the most important thing perhaps to mention at this point is that, as far as I can remember, I think maybe it's, was it 2008 when we sort of stepped in? No, when we first actively got involved with FAN, I think just not as a board member, but back then already, I remember every board that comes, with exception maybe of the few last ones, there was always amendment of the constitution. The dramatic one, I think it's a meeting we had at FNCC. I just remember because Marinda Stein asked the question at the back, and from that day we changed quite a lot. And then a couple of years later, in this very same room when it used to be Studio 77, and that's when Buffy was also a part of that. That was, I think, one of the... So what is really important, I think, is really to just to assure you that you have the mandate as a board to facilitate and convene the AGM where you can just put forward your recommendation and then have membership to vote. Because obviously we have to take into account, in fact, as far as I remember, all the amendments were done to fit the time and to fit the changing needs. So because, I mean, back then we were talking about we used to shoot on tapes and then we moved to DVD. Now we're talking about digital protection and all sort of stuff. So I think it's really important that all these things is also really to speak to the ever-changing needs.
It's like that one moment that the light is shining on you, so you must quickly add. So a quick history lesson. 1996, there was a Producers Association of Namibia. The first Namibian Film Festival was held at the Franco-Namibian Cultural Center, which is now the Islamic Center. Yeah. And there was, the first poster was made for the festival by Linda, can't remember her name, editor, Linda Low. Anyway, we were a bunch of people there, and we got an opportunity to screen something, and screened our movies and whatever kind of stuff, and there was some, whatever. And there was a filmmaker from Burkina Faso called Dani Koyate, and he was in town, and there was also another French filmmaker called Jean Rouge, and he was in town. And they discussed, and the question was asked, so what do we do? And we said, you got to organize in order to lobby government, etc. This was before Film Commission and stuff. So we got together, lobbied, and it was the Producers Association of Namibia. And the Producers Association was a lot of interesting people, filmmakers in it. And that eventually, by 2000, because the Film Commission was finally going to be implemented, we lobbied successfully for government to have a film commission. Then they said, Producers Association of Namibia is too exclusive to producers. So it became the Filmmakers Association. I think Joel was one of the first board members or something. But yeah, but that happened at FNCC. So that constitution that we started and stuff has been amended through the years and stuff. And it then became the FAN constitution. And that has been going through some life and everything like that, and so forth and so forth. That is now the constitution that you have. And obviously, there is loopholes in it, for sure, 100%. One of the loopholes is that the constitution never had a code of conduct, meaning we can't help, like our members go from here, end up in the Film Commission board, and then whew, we don't hear from them. After X amount of years or whatever, come back and say, no, we can't, because we signed an NDA with NFC, we can't talk to you about what we discussed there. And then the question is, so why did we elect you to sit there? So, and there is and not only that, also media have changed. AI, whatever. We need to start talking about current media, not just say videotape and, I don't know, the Constitution might say videotape and whatever kind of stuff, which is not relevant anymore. So there is a reason for looking at the Constitution and update it and make it relevant to our conditions. The KPIs, I love what you want to do. It's great stuff, so keep moving. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think also you touched on the next point as well that I wanted to mention in terms of the terminologies as well. Because there has to be also like an agreement as well with the FAN board and the NFC board, right? This agreement can be separate, yes, but I think also the Constitution doesn't necessarily clarify the relationship and what the relationship looks like and what's required, because, you know, cool, yes, you've signed an agreement or an NDA with the NFC or MICT to not divulge certain information. However, I mean, you are there with a mandate, you know, from FAN, and you need to carry through those objectives. But that's something that we've discussed with some of, I mean, Esther and also Ronald as well, as to how do we communicate that? How do we work around that rather? And what does an agreement look like so that it doesn't feel like we're infringing on, you know, on their agreements with government, but still make sure that, you know, we're aligned in terms of the objective, and those objectives are still being prioritized when, you know, they are addressing industry objectives. So I think we are all in agreement that maybe we do need some refining, and we do need some tuning, and we do need to evolve with the times as well. So I think maybe from our side, what we will do is that we will try to formulate a sort of a comprehensive document in terms of the amendments and the changes we want to make within the Constitution. And then we'll run it past all the members. We'll share it with you guys. But I think that we first want to also contact a legal advisor who can, you know, help us close some of those loopholes and just firm up the constitution. So I think we've received some sort of permission in that regard. So I'm happy with that. There was also mention of incorporating, sorry, there's a spelling error here. It says guilt, but we meant guild with a D. I think that's also something that we need to discuss further and see how that works. But just to throw it in there as well, just to let you guys know that we do want to figure out how would a guild system work and how does fans' involvement come in as well? How does fans sort of like assist with that? Is it something that sits under FAN, or is it sort of like a separate entity altogether? Do we want a separate entity? Do we have enough resources for a separate entity for a guild system? Or is this something that just, FAN could run with and establish and maybe have one or two of the members assist with that standardization? Yeah, and then there's also membership fees. I think membership fees have been the same for quite some time now, but I know that at the same time, if you do want to change the membership fees, whether it's increase or decrease them, it has to come with, either taking away certain benefits or increasing the benefits and adding value to the members. And I think we first have to sell the idea as to if we're going to increase the membership fees because we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to have a consultant, to assist with the guild system, we want to have certain services maybe be external and not, everything being done by FAN. But obviously a lot of things carry costs, and that would justify some of the increments that we want to introduce. Because it is an annual fee that you pay once off. But I think this will also assist with having certain incentives with having or being able to introduce certain incentives for the board. Because currently, as we're sitting, obviously we do get some funds from the NFC, but the funds are not enough, to do the training that we want to do. And also that doesn't allow us to have a sitting fee, for example, as a board, unlike the NFC. So, and I know that a lot of other boards do have incentives whenever, you have either like an AGM or a very important meeting. We just need to figure out what constitutes a board sitting, right? But I think we would probably also consult with some of the FAN members and see how we can introduce some incentives for not just the current board, but also just in future, so that it doesn't feel like every minute is a minute of charity work, but also just if we need to go to a meeting, for example, we find ourselves a lot of times using our own funds, to go to meetings. So, and not everybody is able to, commit to every meeting, because if you, for example, look at just between January and now, the NBC meetings, the Monjila meetings, the NIPD meetings, it's traveling up and down. And a lot of it this year is because, and a lot of this year's money has come from our own pocket because we haven't received the annual funds yet from NFC. So it's just something that we're considering, but again, we'll post it to the members, and then we'll probably also get an input. But we also want to welcome the idea of having committees, because sometimes when you have a lot of people giving input, it becomes almost like, I don't want to use the word empty vessel, but it can be very disruptive, and it can be very distracting in the sense that you've got 60 people giving their own opinion about something, but you can also just set up a committee that, deals with, certain issues, and then, you can just, propose it to the members for the final go-ahead. So if we do reach out to some of you guys in terms of, having some of these committees to help us reach some of these decisions, would highly appreciate your participation in that. Other than that, I think that is really it in terms of the Constitution. So, Mr. Amas, I think you can go to or unless if you've got a question, please go for it.
Thank you. So I I have a question and a few comments. I'll start with the comments. I do agree extending it to a 3-year tenure or even 2 years. Maybe 2 years is actually better because then you can do a little bit more than just a year. The issue around, so what I would want to suggest for FAN is that you become a member of the Namibia Institute for Corporate Governance. I sit on that board, and it's important for you to be seen, especially from a governance perspective, that you're in alignment with them. When you become a member, you have certain, obviously, benefits that you get, and then some of them are also the board evaluations, which you obviously are proposing here in terms of the KPI. So ideally, you wouldn't do that amongst yourself. You'd have an external person to do those evaluation and then produce the report. Then the issue, and then that would also help you with just the issues around your governance of frequent meetings and all of that because they are experts at NICG. Then the issue around incentives. So with the incentives, so for example, NICG has been in operation, I think, for probably 6 years or more, but their board members are not incentivized. They are thinking of it this year now. And because they needed to raise a certain amount of money so that it becomes self-sustaining for them to be able to pay that and not rely on, and they don't get, in fact, at least you have support from NIFC. They don't get any other funding except through membership or trainings that they offer. So then in terms perhaps to wait it out a bit and then really build up enough capacity for eventually for the incentives. That's just the one thing. And then with the, in terms of the membership and restructuring, what NICG has also done is obviously they have different levels of category. So they've got individual members, so then you can, they have, then they have corporates, then they have SMEs. So they've got different categories, and those different categories pay different things. So in the case of FAN, then you'd have obviously those that have production houses, or then you'd have the individual that is sort of just checking out the industry. So also maybe structuring in that way, and then you have different sourcing. In terms of, trainings and all this capacity building and mentorship, those are also avenues that can build up resources for FAN. And so once you then have reached a certain milestone, then you can say, okay, cool, how can we incentivize it? In terms of, and I can believe an association is very taxing, right? So having these committees, so I'm on a membership marketing committee for NICG, and it's a working committee. So I and a few others are then tasked to drive membership into the fund, but they've got an overall board. So then perhaps that's also a structure that you can look at and say you have an overall board, but then you've got these committee people that are assisting, that volunteer, because you want to see, you know, governance or whatever produced in the country. So that's just some of the recommendations perhaps that you can look at. I just wanted to understand, my question is, what is a guild system? What is that and how does that work?
Okay, so if I may, through the chair. So you heard in Cecil's history lesson that they initially started out with what is, I would then assume, a producer's guild, essentially. So it's a bunch of people in a particular trade that get together and organize and do lobby, etc. That's the simplest definition. Now, the situation with the film industry is that, yes, we are a film industry, but there are different chapters within that industry. And how do we cater for everybody's needs in that particular, in our situation? Yes, I think what the history has shown is the industry is too small, or the population is too small to have 10 different organizations to represent. So you want to structure it under one organization or body that really then addresses the blanket needs of the industry, but then you still need those individuals underneath that can make sure that the individual needs, for instance, for the gaffers, for the scriptwriters, for the directors, or the producers even, that those needs are addressed succinctly through whatever we are proposing, whether it's our programs or just our normal governance as an association. So that's essentially the guild system. The way that we're going to have this conversation going on and we'll structure it properly. I love all the suggestions that you made, and we'll definitely be in touch to get those insights and inputs in terms of that. But just a simple one. I think there is room for us to arrange within different departments within the industry and to then break that down to a regional level. There was one suggestion on the group through the questions, why can't we have board members for every region? It might not necessarily be practical on board level, but maybe on the guild level and these different committee levels, I think that it could be feasible then. Also very important about this guild, about the guild system. It could touch, and I will suggest it in our recommendations coming forward, it would maybe then touch on the fees that you need to pay, and the suggestion that you made there it sounded awesome. It would definitely work in terms of that. On the one hand, but also in terms of the benefits that you would then derive from that, per se. But most importantly, is to set standards and accountability for us as an industry. Because one of the key conversations that we're having as an industry is we want to get people to come in and use our expertise. How do we guarantee that we're always giving top-notch expertise or that we remain marketable? One person could come in and mess it up for all of us. So you need to have some sort of system through which you can hold people accountable. And the guild system would, I think, address that.
Yeah, I think all of this is just to really add some structure to the industry and professionalize the industry like we want to. Yeah, it's all part of that vision. But Mr. Amos, please, next agenda point, I guess.
Right. Thank you very much, Vice Chair, for that point, and thank you very much for your valuable inputs. We will definitely sum up this topic as we go and try and reach out to everybody to go ahead with that voting on specific points and how to go about it. The next point is the way forward, and under this way forward, I will hand over to the chairman to sort of round this off or round it up and share with us a bit of the way forward. And after the vice chair, I would want, after the chairman, I would want Mr. James, our representative on the NFC board, just to speak to us, share with us how things are going so far, and whatever. Yeah, so Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Comrade Secretary. I think the next time I will get you. Yeah, the way forward. I think I touched, Panasha also touched on that. The Vice also touched on the way forward now. Maybe just to break it down. So one of the key things is to get these amendments going and to get the process, the conversation going. So be on the lookout on the group for the recommendations in terms of the constitutional amendments that we will propose. We'll have an ongoing conversation there, so please do participate. From what I can see, calling another SGM to actually do the vote might be a long shot for us. Time is also running out for us, so we'll have to look at alternatives for that. So I'm just giving you a heads up in terms of that. For the programs that we are suggesting and the processes going forward there, it's essentially now in the lobbying phase. For the big one, the PPP program, the next step would be then to do the feasibility study. To get a proper feasibility study going, which you can then expect to probably continue for most of the rest of this year. For the RCCP, which we think is a smaller program, we will try and lobby to get that one off the ground as soon as possible, as soon as we can secure some sort of funding for that one. We are looking at a few different models for that. As you know, our key pain point here is that we cannot constantly just beg for grants, charity. We need to do it in a sustainable manner. So we'll have to look at that particular action. So in terms of the programs, also the lobbying part, we're going to have an NIPDB meeting tomorrow, conveniently scheduled after our engagement with you, where we will then take these programs forward and present it to them, hopefully then to influence the conversations going forward, especially in setting up, because now it's days. I think there's 3, 4, 5 days left for you to say anything that'll matter for the next 5 years. And so we're definitely hoping to be loud and clear with that. And I hope we did our homework properly and we crossed our T's and dotted our I's. So that's going to be the next step. So please keep an eye out for that. We'll keep you posted on that process. Also, as part of that, and if the board would allow me, as being a participant in this process, in terms of the position paper, I dare say, look, if you're going to go buy a Mercedes-Benz with $10, or you're going to buy a car with $10, don't expect the Mercedes-Benz. I understand that part. But I honestly have to say, in terms of the data collection part, I wanted us to have so much more. I mean, we've got so many people in the industry. We've done so many things over the years, and it was difficult getting that information. But the one thing that I realized, if we just continue with this process, by this time next year when this conversation happens again, we will have data if we just continue. So keep an eye out for that as well. As the Vice also mentioned, and the Secretary also touched on that, also keep a lookout for the committees. We need your participation there. The 7 people or 8 people with Yalo's astute contributions, we're not enough to do all the things that we mentioned here tonight, from standardization, guilds being implemented, programs being lobbied. We'll definitely need your help and support. Some of the key groups or other committees that we are looking at is especially members' engagement, as we referred to. We want to have more fun things to do. We can't get together for serious meetings only. On a very regular basis, screen our movies, chit-chat, share ideas. So that'll hopefully be unfolding very soon, maybe in the next 2 weeks or so. So keep an eye out for that. Avail yourself. Please come along. Enjoy the time with us. The standardization group, we need to formalize some sort of rate card for the industry. We need to formalize, standardize, sign off on standard working conditions for the industry. What's a day? Is it 10 hours, 12 hours? When do you start paying overtime? Etc. We need to set those things. There's a draft document out. A few of us, including the commissioner, geez, the guy sent me like maybe 20 documents that I had to go and refer to in terms of that. But a lot of work was done. I think Joel's name and quite a few of you's names came up in those documents already. So I know a lot of work was done. So do expect us to come around to you guys again and saying, okay, wait, what did you mean by this? And how can we adjust it? Or what would you advise in terms of that? So in terms of the standardization, there is a standardization committee. The links will be shared on the groups. You are free to go and join. We cannot force you, but you are free to go and join and participate. Please put your weight behind that. But that's basically it now. It for now. Remember, it's 2 months left, technically speaking, of our tenure. Yeah, let's not, let's not jump the gun or preempt. But even at that, for me personally, as a chairperson of this board, by then, I want us to have had a lot of things done. At the end of this thing, whether we continue or not, but let that rather be a continuation of things that are implemented rather than still trying to do what we did last year or trying to do what we were supposed to do last year. And just from my vantage point, bird's eye view, I think we're pretty much there. We're on the line with the position paper in terms of our programs and what we're suggesting there. We just need to get it over and get the conversation done. And then the small nitty-gritty things, household things, as we mentioned, we'll address them as we go. It's like governance as such. I see there's a question on the floor.
Right.
The mic is essentially important for the guys online.
One of your drawbacks for the survey was the timing. You did that in like November to its December, and people were fatigued and tired. So I think that's also, you need to take that into account. I think you keep referring to that as well. So even again, if you question, because you get people funny that would question and say, the timing was also, we did it at the time towards the end of the year, and that might have also impacted on the number of participation. So just as something to put in. But again, these fun activities that you're proposing, that's also an avenue to collect data in a fun, in a more relaxed way. Because again, people, we need to understand people are different. There are some that might find, WhatsApp group very evasive or not. So maybe they're more, you can get more out of them at a social event. So perhaps then having, without being too much, perhaps either having surveys printed out, engaging with them, that also is a way of collecting data. So it's not just screening. Yes, it's screening and we're hanging out, but we also have a strategic objective behind, which is to use that as also data gathering. Okay.
No, absolutely. Very brilliant suggestion there. So yeah, other than that, it's just making work of all these brilliant ideas that we have here. Finally, in conclusion from me, because hopefully I won't have to talk again. What we did in terms of the project paper and the two programs that we proposed there, I can tell you honestly, if you know me, you would know that the PPP program didn't sit well with me from the get-go because it's too centralized. You know, who's these people that will benefit so much and why can't everybody benefit as much? The reality is, like once I started understanding the program and the depth of the program, it deals with the key problems that we have in this industry. Number one, we are not a business. That thing turns it into a business immediately. So, okay, I have to accept. Hence the regional content creation plan to give something from grassroots that feeds into a working system. And looking at those things last night when we looked at what we were going to present here tonight, I actually felt some sort of solace or a sense of accomplishment. I think the board kind of got the buttons through the hole. Okay, and in that sense, thank you very much for your participation as well. But please, to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Go ahead. Right, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to emphasize, obviously, taking in consideration of your input there about the timing, and also looking at what we have left now before the end of our term, and like the chairman said, whether we continue or not, we have these very important points to address as far as the Constitution is concerned. So we are going to come asking for your participation to make sure that is addressed before the AGM, because when we go to AGM, we want to have these answers and then practice our democratic rights in terms of voting either for the new board or give us an extension to our mandate. So just an emphasis on that for people to really participate, and timely also, because the time that we have before the AGM is very limited. Thank you so much. Mr. Ronald James, please give me a round of applause. Yes? Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And I just want to, as a filmmaker and a fan member, want to congratulate the fan board for the amazing work that you have done in the last year. That is really, you have turned the tide in the film industry in Namibia. I've been living in Namibia since 2007, and the film industry has always been, it steps one step forward and three steps back. One step forward, three steps back. We're always struggling to actually just make a living from this. As a freelance filmmaker, to be able to pay my rent at the end of the month because I've had enough work is very difficult over the years. And I believe that the work that you guys have been doing is steering the industry into that direction, that we'll get to a point where we have full-time film employment. I was recently on a benchmarking mission, and a lot of the things that were discussed here tonight was, I also learned that there, was the things that will create a viable and sustainable industry is what Panache was saying, TV series, studios, and film incentives. And as from the NFC board, we are strongly working on things like that, such what do you call it, programs. And so yes, working together with FAN going forward will be I believe, an advantage for the film industry. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. James, for your thank you. And we wish you all the best, honestly speaking, from us as the board, and I'm sure on behalf of the members as well. We wish you all the best, and we want you to know you can count on our support if that will make your job and the film industry's job easier. So I'm sure everybody else will have an open door policy when you come knocking, just for the betterment of our industry. All the best. Thank you. Oh, all right. We have. Do you want to say something quickly? Okay, we have questions that came from people that joining us online. I will just give the vice chairperson to quickly read through those questions, and if we can answer them, we answer them. And I see Mr. Tim have a hand up as well. Vice, go ahead, and then we go to Mr. Tim and Joel.
Okay. Look, essentially we are done, and also the questions that are online are not very sort of pressing matters as such. I think there are questions that are open for discussion, and I think maybe I must just mention that on the group, just to carry on the conversation, I think online. And also, we don't have all the answers. I mean, some of these questions require inputs from everybody. But somebody just asked about, last year's meeting, for those who are not, perhaps around. But last year's SGM that we hosted was really just to discuss the NFC board representation, which was sort of like a pressing issue at the time, and that was resolved. And then we just briefly touched on our vision as FAN and where we want to take it. So I think we'll see if we can share those minutes. If anybody really wants to hear from that conversation, we're more than happy to share it. Other questions were just, regarding, are there any discussions with the NFC on specific policies to ensure full representation of the nation? Understand representation from different regions is a step in the right direction, but I also believe that the reason for lack of representation all these years was not the absence of people from various regions. Those are conversations we are having with the NFC, as well as NIPDB, yeah, and the board, and us, the board, obviously. So yes, those conversations are ongoing. And then anybody else was just suggesting that maybe we have a separate team to review the current production. Somebody said, okay, so while we're waiting for this vehicle, for this concession, for this, beautiful company that will assist in creating, quality productions and reviewing them, is there any other body or group that reviews the current production, or they would be interested in reviewing the current productions? But I think that's a group conversations maybe that we can continue on WhatsApp. That's what the group is there for. It's for interacting and engaging. But other than that, honestly, there's nothing else from our end. Regarding the poll, or what is it, the questionnaire that we had sent out, the survey, sorry, that was a pressing time. So we were chasing NDP 6 inclusion. So that's why, we didn't have another time. So sometimes when we do ask for information, it's not just because, we think that, okay, maybe this is the right time, but sometimes something else is driving it to. Mm. Yeah, we. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So we did post it again this year as well. I think 2 weeks ago we posted the survey again. But yes, again, we'll try and make it clearer, maybe in the memos as well, because normally we try and send out like a memo to explain why we need the data and why we need the participation, but we'll try to make it clearer and understand and make you understand why there's a time limit to it.
If I may. But absolutely, I get your point. It's a very good, I won't say excuse, but it's a reality that we probably did the survey at a very taxing time, as you said, and that did influence or impact the outcome. So thank you for that heads up there. Noted. We will mention it now, rather than complain.
All right, so we are done, honestly. If there are any words from... yes, Mr. Tim.
Guys, just 1 second, we're about to close.
Yeah. It's essentially, look, a special general meeting is super important, but it should never be 4 hours. It should be down to 90 minutes at the most. And one way in which you achieve that is by sharing all this documentation up front. And the members that then come here come with their questions based on that documentation. It's for us to sit here for 3.5 hours. You see how dedicated everybody is, but it's not how you run an organization efficiently. And part and parcel of being in the film industry is to be efficient. Okay, so it's just, let's try and work on that. But otherwise, everybody well done for sitting it out, right?
No, absolutely. I think that's definitely worth noting, for sure. Thank you. Angela? Closing remarks?
Maybe, good evening, everybody. This is probably where I come in to have the closing remarks. And Tim, we hear your part, and I think we will do better next time. And for every other person, those online, and the ones who make their time to come here to listen to us, to see our vision, to hear what we're trying to do. It's not that we try to be quiet or not to want to engage with you guys. It was just, we need to find a way to have some papers ready to be in order for us to have something to present. And I think what we did today, it was not to have the 3.5 hours from your time. It was just a mere, it just came out the wrong way, but we will learn from this. And the board and everybody else thanks you, even the ones in absentia.
Thank you.